but it turns out, or something came up,
Right.
Some emergency or something urgent, you have to leave. You can just type in the chat like, hey guys, I'm voting to disband, but actually something just came up and I have to go, right? And then like they just be like, well, I mean, shit, that guy has to go anyway. Our key might just be brick. That's unlucky. That's now the problem is that's kind of hard to tell the difference between that and someone who's just saying that, but they just don't want to be in the key anymore.
Right.
But there's nothing you can do against that. I still think them doing something is better than nothing at all. No one really likes actual levers. I don't think a lot of innocent people are going to be punished with this, but I could be proved wrong. It's one of those things where the theory of what Blizzard is trying to do makes sense, but how it plays out in practice, you just never know, right? So interested to see how it plays out, but I think it's better than doing nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting because they have mentioned this. How many patches ago was it? Because remember when they were trying to ban levers?
It was like
That was like a pretty
Arakara,
big
so
deal.
it was season 1 of this expansion, right?
Yeah, which this doesn't affect, by the way, because that was in Heroic.
Yeah.
And even if it was in Mythic Zero, which is also another lever situation, like this is only in a Mythic Plus key where you put in a keystone, so it wouldn't even affect those things.
Yeah, I kind of just wonder like why they needed to take this measure when they were already taking action to begin with. But I mean, I do like the whole branding players with a scarlet letter or some type of this person might be a problem to play with. And I wonder if they can extend that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I wonder if they can like extend that further to some type of shadow ban system.
Yeah, or like this person's a known patter when they sign up to your raid. Like they've got good parsons or whatever,
Yeah.
but they're a known patter. They get that mark on their application.
Or the opposite too. Like this person's a great tank, great
True,
person to play with.
This person's a mechanics oriented player. Or you could do like the honor system in League, I guess. That's I don't know. I guess my thing with this, I kind of think it's more likely that this won't do enough rather than it doing too much. I kind of think it's more likely that like they're gonna make it so not sensitive to avoid the abuse cases that might exist that it just isn't actually going to catch that high a percentage of toxic behavior, especially if my theory is right that the toxic behavior happens largely among players who aren't usually toxic, and then it's like it'd be pretty hard to mark those players without having a very low threshold for putting that mark on people.
Yeah, you don't want to mark the people who didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's at all. But to answer your question, Dorky, like why, or at least I think why would Blizzard do this? They already said they were banning levers. Either that's not a very effective way, it's hard for them to find them, and what they were doing before wasn't good enough, or they're offloading the work. Right? They're like, we can just let the community police themselves by putting in this very simple thing, right? And then we don't have to worry about trying to find exactly who's leaving and who's not. Because I bet there's a bunch of false reports with that. So I bet that like them actually trying to do that. Didn't we all respond when they were like, we're gonna ban levers, and we were kind of like, how the fuck are they gonna do that?
Yeah.
Like how do you know outside of like people reporting people, then that could be bad faith actors too reporting. So like it's really really difficult. So they probably just saw this as probably a better solution to that. My assumption would be like that wasn't very effective.
Yeah, I think any system that's like automated has got to be better than any rely on them to manually ban people, because that's just like season over season their passion for doing that is going to wax and wane. So having an automated system, I think it's a step in a good direction. I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic that this is going to make things better, but I'm somewhat pessimistic that it's not going to make them a lot better. That's my current take on this. But I'm also glad that they're doing something.
Yep, agreed.
Okay, let's move on to other 11.2 stuff. Do you guys want to tackle the hot speculation of a third DH spec?
Oh, I'm fully on board. I don't even think it's speculation. I think it's like money back guarantee.
Money back guarantee. Yeah, I mean it looks compelling. There's like a void DH meta thing that's out.
So I haven't looked at it. Why exactly are people speculating this? Because of like a raid boss, right?
YouTube Premium is ad-free YouTube and the YouTube Music app all together.
Tackle the hot speculation of a third DH spec.
Oh, I'm fully on board. I don't even think it's speculation. I think it's like money back guarantee.
Money back guarantee. Yeah, I mean it looks compelling. There's like a void DH meta thing that's out.
So I haven't looked at it. Why exactly are people because of like a raid boss, right?
I might be missing a few things, but yeah, there's a raid boss, which by the way has this like really weird optional tag to it, but I have a theory about what that is about too. So the boss is a Demon Hunter Council boss, 3 Demon Hunters, and one of them is just the most Havoc Demon Hunter. Their abilities are literally Blade Dance and other Havoc things. The other boss, the second boss, is a Vengeance Demon Hunter, which just has all the Vengeance toolkit, just straight up. And then there's a third Demon Hunter that just has an entirely different toolkit of cool-looking mechanics. And it's like, okay, that's first of all, I think that alone is just like, I'm 90% sure that this is happening. Plus, there's a precedent for this, right? Like, they did this last expansion. And in the middle of the patch, not on the release, they, like, kind of shadow dropped a spec. Right? They announced it. I don't remember. When did they announce AUG? Was it after...
It was after Sarkareth died, right?
It was after Sarkareth died. Okay, and then they announced it to come out in the 0.5. I think it was at 0.7, one of the... Okay, so...
It's 0.5.
That... I'd be willing to bet a ton that it's either when this boss dies, specifically the Shadow Council boss, or when the end boss dies, or something. Like, that's going to be the new hype announcement for 11.5. Is there's a new Demon Hunter spec. Also, the boss is listed as optional. There's a bunch of speculation going on with that right now. Do you know anything more about that than me, Dratnos, rather than...
There's a, like the Hall of Fame achievement has been updated to require you to kill all the bosses now to get it, except that one. It's actually it's got 7 instances of killing the last boss in the achievement right now, but there are 8 bosses in the raid, so my guess is that you don't have to kill that boss for Hall of Fame or anything.
Okay, that is not my guess. Although this is all speculation because who the fuck knows, but until they clarify it. But that is so strange to me. That's never happened before. So they would just do that out of nowhere, right? That's in Butcher that didn't happen. You could go kill Imperator Margok, but you had to go back and kill Butcher to like end the race and also to get the achievement for Heimal. It included Butcher. So and Raden is like an extra mythic boss, totally separate thing. But this has never happened before. They mentioned the boss is optional. I heard a theory earlier that in the DH Discord, I don't know, someone could have made this up, by the way. This thing that makes the most sense to me, that it's going to take a Demon Hunter to summon this boss, to make this boss appear. And the reason it's listed or even mentioned by Blizzard as optional is you would have to go through, like, it's possible in a normal 10-man normal raid, there are groups that clear with normal and heroic being their main content that don't have a Demon Hunter. So you need to have the ability to go to the last boss to, like, without going to this boss, because you might not have a Demon Hunter that can summon you, right? You may want to look for a Demon Hunter in the group finder or whatever, but they're just doing some, like, crazy epic lore shit with that requires you to have a Demon Hunter do it, and that is why it's optional at all. But as far as my assumption is, as far as Mythic and the race is concerned, like, completing the raid once they actually update the achievement, and also for the race, I imagine you're going to have to kill every boss. And also the boss, it drops really OP boots that, like, interact with the cloak.
Yeah.
They're, like, bonusly, like, personal looted. It's not even very rare. And it drops a regular tier piece. Like, just, like, its shoulders or something. Just, like, one of the tier pieces just drops off this boss, which totally does not look like what would happen on, like, an optional encounter. It needs to be clarified by Blizzard either way, but I am, like, very off of the idea, because it would just be so random, and I don't understand the logic at all with it. There's just randomly an optional boss that isn't in the race or isn't as part of the achievement. It just doesn't make sense.
I'm still of Dranos' opinion. I don't actually know either, but I assume it's also going to be something where you don't... I mean, why else would it be optional, right?
Well,
That makes the most sense.
We don't know that it's... They just mentioned, like, the word optional somewhere, but, like...
In the blue post, I believe.
Yeah, but, like, there's no precedent for that ever existing. Like, it's like just Blizzard ripping that without any explanation. And the reason I think maybe there isn't any yet, or maybe why there won't be, is it's somehow tied to how this spec is going to get released, because, like, they're obviously not going to talk about that. But, like, the whole, like, we released a raid, and getting to the end boss without having to kill one of the bosses, that has happened.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't need to kill this boss to get the Mythic achievement of killing all the bosses in Mythic. That is completely... That is never... Nothing like that has ever existed. Like, why would that randomly happen, right? Like, that's the part I can't get behind.
Yeah, I mean...
Here's a question.
It probably...
If it was optional, are you guys going to kill and raise the war first?
Well, that's so I started thinking about that earlier on stream, and I basically like was racking my brain, and I ran through so many situations, and I have no fucking clue. I am well. So number one, the people of the race, like we have to support ourselves, so like removing content is something we would not choose to do. There's also, regardless of like, there's only like a couple of guilds in the world that raid enough that could even ever potentially win. Let's just say like 4 or 5 or something like that. So like, if those 4 or 5 guilds were like, hey, it'd be great for us if we had 8 bosses of content instead of 7, right? Like, let's all, it doesn't matter what order you kill them in, but the race to world first, as the community deems it, is going to be like whoever kills these 5 bosses. And yeah, maybe you'd risk some random world 8th guild or something, like going for the last boss instead of killing this other one, but like those guilds, there's
They're not gonna
literally
win.
no way.
Yeah.
There's no way. So like, you know, that's what I, like, so something like that, but there's no way the top guilds will be like, you know what, you don't have to kill this boss, we're just going to remove a boss from the race for world first content this season, and it's about rushing the last boss first. Why would you do that intentionally? As a business case, it's just terrible. Not to mention fun. It's actually, it'd be hard to believe, but we actually find it really fun to kill bosses and with a bunch of people watching them and stuff like that, you know, like why would you choose not to, unless it was like unkillable or something?
Yeah, my suspicion is it kind of doesn't really matter too much what, like, even if everybody decided that they didn't want that it wasn't going to be mandatory to kill it, it's still very likely that the same guild that would kill all 8 first, right? Like there wouldn't be different guilds that got 8 out of 8 versus killing the last boss first, because like after you killed the last boss, what
I mean,
are
we
you
saw
gonna do?
this
You're gonna
tier.
go kill this
No.
one, right?
So maybe a piece of information that might be interesting to you is when we have lost a few races or have still been in contention for winning them, there's like a certain amount of time we can be at this facility, and they are like sometimes are rescheduling our flights when this ends, when we lose or win, and like
Okay, yeah.
we've killed a boss after losing on the same day, and then they're like, you're flying out tomorrow, like we're not changing those flights, so like if you don't kill this tonight, you're flying home, you don't raid for 2 days from now, and you could potentially lose if it mattered to you, like world second or whatever, because of this. So like imagine all the race, all the hype is to kill the last boss. They would almost certainly fly us home before we killed that last one, right? If it was truly decided that that one wasn't part of this.
Yeah, but even in that case, like, would that mean nobody has killed it? That would have to be like a butcher situation where it was so hard that like you didn't have a strat. Because it's going to be what, like, it's not the second to last boss or anything like that, right? Like it's in the middle of the raid.
It's in the middle of the raid. Yeah.
So like, presumably, you know, if say it's a 2-week tier like usual, but this is probably a boss that can die on with week 1 gear. So like, if you don't frog it, somebody else probably already will have, and you'll be able to come back with more gear and do it in like 20 pulls or something, even if it's kind of a hard boss, right? Like, say Sprocket was the optional boss, which was very early in the raid for that.
I mean, it's the exact same spot in the raid technically as where this boss is. So Sprocket is a Great Bear,
which was also like a generationally hard boss. But say you didn't kill Sprocket week 1. Which you didn't, but week 2 you came in, and you know, after Gallywix, how long do you think it would take you to go back and kill Sprocket? Now that say 12 guilds in the world have all done it, and you had their videos and stuff.
Okay, how many? I think another interesting thing is how many guilds are so preconditioned now to just do the strat and the thing that's been laid out for them. Who's going to be the first guild that doesn't go to the boss that we're on and we have chose to go to, and look at our VOD and strat and decides to be the guild that's going to problem solve and go to this boss first? Because kind of the first guild that does that outside of the race is the one that's going to race all the time, right? So it's like, it would be fun for you, but objectively you'd take more time than everyone else because you have now entered the problem solving process. So I think that's, I don't know if that matters. It's just a fascinating thing to think about, of like who would actually do that. At what guild rank does it make sense to do that?
It's also reasonably likely that it's just correct to kill this boss, even if it was optional. Like, it would have to be pretty hard to not be worth killing, given that it drops some pretty funny loot. I guess, you know, if the loot doesn't matter this tier, then, you know, maybe not.
That's kind of interesting. This is like an okay like segue, just in general, because like this is not relatable or matters to anyone who's listening to this as far as like how you'd interact with the raid, but imagine if the 5th boss, it takes 80 to 100 pulls. Like, that's a lot of time. That is, like, you'd lose a day of progression on the end boss. Is potentially one kill of this boss on Mythic going to be worth 80 to 100 progression pulls of the end boss? I can tell you the answer to that is almost certainly no, if you don't need to kill it. But it depends on how hard it is, right? Like, would we... try it? Would we do other bosses and wait for someone to be the fact finder of like who wants to actually spend an hour to figure out how hard this
Dude,
boss
that would be kind of sick. Like, I'm just thinking about this from my perspective. There's a decent chance if it actually was optional and like the race guilds agreed it was optional, which the reason you do that is because like you don't trust each other, you know, if Blizzard says it's optional and you don't trust the other guys to not just go for the last boss, right? Like, you're just doing what Blizzard says, right? If they make the achievement to not kill it, for instance, right? Like, presumably you'd be thinking about it and maybe, you know, if they insist that it's optional, then they kind of can set the tone largely among the guilds. Obviously, you guys could agree differently, but like, you know, it's pretty easy for one guild to defect from the others and just say we're going for what Blizzard says is first, right?
Yeah. I mean, all this is interesting. I just feel like all it takes is Blizzard making one post clarifying this obviously very confusing situation, and I mean, like, for example, just like, hey, add the boss to the achievement, and then it's like GG. You know, it's like it just solves everything. Or at least make it.
But if they want it to be optional, like that's what optional means, is that you don't have to do it, right? So
I'm kind of okay. The loot totally doesn't make sense, except for the fact that it has like personal looted, probably the most OP item in the raid, I assume. That drops off the boss, so maybe that supports this argument. But like, is there a world where they could really cook here? And like, the Race World First is just straight up 7 bosses. But that other boss is so fucking hard, and like they're not nerfing that shit. Like, it would take us weeks. Like, people are gonna stop watching, and we will have flown home before realistically we were ever going to kill this boss. And they just left it like that because why not? You know, and like now it dropped regular base high-level mythic tier shoulders. Like, none of that supports this argument, you know. But I don't know. I wonder if they could do some. Maybe the Demon Hunter spec, when this boss dies on mythic, gets shadow dropped that fucking day.
Oh,
right?
That would be so sick.
That'd be cool,
and then it just like randomly. I don't know. They could do a lot of stuff, and maybe that's why they're not clarifying. I just got home today, and this is all brand new information for me. I haven't been around for the last 2 days, but like, I'm surprised that Blizzard hasn't had to be like, here's how this is going to work, because it is objectively very confusing.
Dude, even if it was just Sprocket difficulty, if the Race World First guilds weren't doing it, then like a bunch of non-Race World First guilds might decide to just go for World First Sprocket. Like, I'm thinking about it,
cool.
like, because my guild, we got World 12th Sprocket. We killed it the same week you guys did. We're basically on the same level as you guys, for all intents and purposes. And would we have gone for that instead of walking straight past it to Bandit? Especially if World First was on the line? I don't know, that'd be kind of fun. That could be a kind of fun, like, you know.
I guess it depends on the boss. Some bosses are easier to figure out than others, but like, some bosses would be so fun to be the guild figuring it out, because you never get a chance to do that in this game, and that would be really cool. But you're just like, you're just gonna have dissenters within the guild, you know?
Yeah.
Like, hey guys, we have this video. We could get to 20% on this boss in one raid night. That we have a video that they've done all this work for us, or we could be the one guild that's paving the way on this boss. Do we value our time, or do we value fun?
Yeah, because it almost certainly griefs your world rank at the end of the tier.
Grief for world rank too. Yeah, exactly. But you have, because like, it's probably unsurprising to a lot of people listening to this, killing bosses where you have to figure them out is insanely harder than having to you know, just go up and kill it with a video. So, but it's also the thing that makes us all do this. It's extremely fun. We have a lot more fun than all of you because we get to do this as well. But like, it's not realistic that you ever get a chance. It is. I wonder. I'm so really
curious what they're gonna do.
I'm so curious. I don't understand. I usually understand. I don't understand, which makes me believe a lot of conspiracy stuff.
Imagine if you're a DH and you ever kill this boss, you can't spec the new spec because you betrayed it, right? And so you can only play the new spec.
That'd be the dumbest thing ever.
I mean, what if you just need to kill this boss on any difficulty to unlock the spec, right? And obviously on LFR or normal, it's just like piss easy. So like literally anyone could just join a group finder and do it, or it becomes an aspirational goal. But then they've never done anything like that. You know, that's also just such a huge... They're clearly doing something new here, I think. Unless, I guess there is a world where all this optional stuff gets cleared out. Somehow there's just some lore thing, and then they just announce after the race is over, hey, by the way, there's this new spec coming out.
Kind of what they did with Og. Like,
yeah, exactly. Because there's precedent for that, because they've literally done it.
A little bit. Like, Sark had Ebonmite kind of mechanics, and Nezuro was Og themed, the legendary that dropped from Sark, but like, it wasn't directly tied to Og. Og just came out afterwards. Yeah.
It feels like we're overanalyzing this.
Yeah,
but
100. We are 100%. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's great podcast content, so it doesn't matter. But we are 100% overanalyzing this because we are going off of nothing. Like nothing, and the only thing we do know is that the only information we have is very weird and confusing. So beyond nothing, we're probably tricking ourselves.
I do think it is cool though. Like the idea of an optional hard boss, kind of like a Melania, would be fucking awesome. But
I think that's one of the less likely things for them to
skeptical.
do, but I agree it would be
Yeah.
super
Would be the
cool.
coolest. Yeah, it would be extremely cool, but extremely unlikely. Also, shadow dropping the spec, unbelievably unlikely.
Yeah.
But because like that's the exact kind of thing. What has their emphasis been this whole expansion? Like, let's get people hyped for these 0.5 and 0.7 patches. That is like they've put so much effort into that. Imagine them releasing a spec and it's not that. Like they're totally gonna do that. Also, there's gonna be a third DH spec. That's sick.
Yeah.
Right?
What is it gonna be?
It looks like, well, I mean, I was looking at its abilities earlier. It just looks like it's gonna be like a melee, just another melee spec.
Like void themed. Yeah.
It needs to be a
like
new tank.
Super void. No, there's not gonna give them 2 tank specs in one class.
Why not, bro? Priests have 2 healer specs.
There's no way. I think
that'd be sick.
Another melee DPS,
Nah,
but it does the abilities.
Apparently,
do
uses like
cool,
two-handed axe too, right?
I think that was a
Or
fake news media post.
That's fake
Oh,
news.
it was fake news. God damn it.
It's just gonna. It has a blink instead of fell rush, which is kind of fun.
Mhm.
And then yeah, I don't like. Someone said my stream was like, "Do you think it's gonna be support?" That's like absolutely not. Like
That'd be sick.
There's no way. Like this doesn't even fit the fantasy of Demon Hunter at all. I think Blizzard cares way too much about that for that to be how it ends up. Also, range, like a fully range spec. Also, no. There's a bunch of classes in this game that have multiple melee specs within that class. That's not like an abnormal thing. I imagine that's what they'll do.
I think it needs to be another tank spec. We're due for another tank spec.
I do think that it kind of explains why if you think about I had this Cook. The DH hero talent specs are kind of like blandish, uninspired compared to the field, right? Like compared to the average
hero
talents, I would say the DH ones are aggressively mid. Like,
you think they would bring out a new hero talent?
Well, they'd have to. If they're making a new spec, they need to like not just make.
Oh, that's true.
They need to make
would
two
you do
new
that,
ones,
though?
right? And they need to like adjust how Eldrachi Reaver and Felskard overlap.
No shot. I don't think so.
Okay, well, how are they going to make a new spec then?
Well, I don't know. But maybe they just give it Eldrachi Reaver and Felskard. That also works. But like the idea that they're going to do a new hero talent, the idea that like, oh, well, now as a Avenged Demon Hunter, you've been playing with these 2 hero talents whole expansion, but now you just lose one of them because we have to create this triangle that we've created with every other spec. I don't think there's any way they've done that. Also, this patch, you're going to have tier sets for specifically those 2 things. So it would have to be specifically a next patch thing. I just think that's so messy that like you're losing a hero talent, even if there's some that people don't necessarily like, and they're like, okay, I can lose that, whatever. I just think that's way too messy.
I think like Felskard for Havoc and Eldrachi for Vengeance, even though Eldrachi for Vengeance is good, right now I don't think it's particularly like good gameplay. So, and like if they don't do that, how they have to do something for the hero talent for the new one.
They can't do that, right? Because then that means all 3 of them will have the new hero talent. If you just do what you just said.
No, because you need to take one away from
each one of those, but then the new spec wouldn't be able to have.
I guess the new spec would have.
Right?
Well, okay, so you could leave Eldrachi or Felskard to be the Havoc Vengeance overlap one, and then one of them becomes either Havoc or Vengeance plus the new spec.
It's the only way
it works. Another new one that's for the. Well, it's like a triangle, right? So you could.
Yes, they're going to make 2 new hero talents.
They have to make. No, they make one. They have to make
they
one
only have to make one. So Havoc or Vengeance, one of them doesn't get the new one and has to keep both Felskard and Eldrachi Reaver for this to make sense.
Unless you give Havoc and Vengeance the new one, and you give.
And you don't give the new one to the.
That would, yeah, that's true. So
ain't no fucking way.
It's almost certainly then going to be, if they do some weird stuff, or they have to take one of the hero talents away from one of the existing specs. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's. We could, by the way, and I think we know this, could all be saying just absolute nonsense for the past like 10 to 15 minutes. Doesn't matter. It's still very interesting and fun to speculate about, and I imagine just great podcast content. That's exactly what podcasts are for, doing exactly that.
The best part about this
we're just making shit up.
anytime you're making shit up like this on a podcast, you are running the risk of in between us saying these inane sentences and the podcast getting released, Blizzard could just explain this stuff, and this podcast becomes so stupid. So hopefully,
it's not actually speculation.
Yeah, I got accused of that multiple times today. Of course, you know this thing. Yeah. So that was good. There was also the Havoc thing. Okay. We could talk about the tier sets a little bit, but I'm interested in what you guys think of. So they're reworking a few specs. One of which I know Dorky has tried out in Brewmaster, and they said they were going to rework Brewmaster and Unholy, but actually Frost seems to be getting like significantly more like reworking type stuff than
that's
Unholy.
A big one.
And also like I think Shadow looks like it got a bunch of new stuff again. I think MM had a bunch of their stuff moved around.
Pro Warrior
so I don't know
too.
exactly which one.
Pro Warrior.
They killed Spellblock. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a pretty big news.
So we have that to talk about, but also they added a new Empower ability, the second one since Slicing Winds, and it's attached to Breath of Cindergosa. And I haven't been around for the last 2 days to see people like trying this on the PTR, but like I thought that was like literally the best use of Empower that you can possibly make in theory. Like if it ends up being, if people are listening to this, just so before I give my take on it, like what it does is you can empower it to 3 and basically it just has a 30-second breath, which is like the most uptime of breath per like just using the ability. You can empower it to 2 and it takes 45 seconds off the CD and it lasts a little or not as long. But it can line up with like a minute and 15 second. I think they were a minute and 15 rotating recently. And then if you empower it once, it only lasts like 8 seconds, but it takes a 75 seconds off the cooldown. So it's like a 45-second CD. And I think this is like also you can move while empowering it. So it's like not as annoying. I think this is like perfect example. I'm so glad they didn't try to force a bunch of empower abilities in the game and they waited to do it like pretty well. Because that I hope it plays out well. Maybe you don't even use the spell, but like there's so many fight situations where it would totally make sense to use all 3 of them in theory, and I really hope it plays out that way. It could be so fun.
100%.
Yeah, so I've played Breath for the past few expansions. I've seen all iterations of it, like the Shadowlands one, where you play for literally 2-minute long breaths, and the more recent iterations where it's like shorter but powerful.
Some have been infinite too.
Yeah, no, I mean it was literally infinite back in Shadowlands. Like I remember when I was progging into it, and I was playing Frost DK, and I just had breath for the entire fight. So it's had its ebbs and flows, but I would say I don't know. I have mixed opinions about this whole empowered breath. On one hand, it solves the issue of the class feeling like it's too much of its identity is baked into breath, but on the other hand, it kind of waters down breath. It just sort of becomes like another cooldown that you press instead of that being your thing. Does that make any sense?
I think so. You still get the most value in if you're using it on the full mode, right? If you don't full empower.
Well, yes and no, because it only caps at 30, right? Like you can't.
Yeah, you get 30 seconds
MLG
on
game it and make it even longer.
Or you get 15 seconds on a 115 CD. So you get more breath per second by empower 3ing it.
Yeah, I think the numbers are you have 25% breath uptime, assuming you use breath on cooldown by using the 3 empower, and you have a 15% uptime on breath if you use the 1, for example, which is like significant, right? That's almost half the amount of breath uptime, but it can line up with CDs. Either way, I think this is boring and a bad use of empower if this becomes true. If you just slam it 3 every time, I think that stinks. That's like a bad use of empower. It's basically like the evoker empower spells. There are ones where there's a scenario where you would use 1, 2, or 3, and that makes the empower mechanic great. And then there are scenarios where you just do 1 every time or 3 every time. And in my opinion, anything that works like that with empower sucks, and it should not be an empower ability. So same thing with DK. If you use it at 1 every time, even though you get less uptime, but it just lines up with your pillar or something every time, that's boring. What would be really cool is like, have you guys ever played breath in a key too low situation where you press breath on a pack and you fucking blast it and then you just use your 2-minute cooldown and it didn't live like it would on a higher key? Bro, you're slamming a 1 on that shit every time. You're doing like a little baby pack. You don't want to hold your 2 minutes. You slam that shit. You're in a raid boss and you know your 2 minutes are coming up, but you're lusting in a minute and a half, or you're lusting in a minute and you're like, man, I don't want to hold my 2-minute cooldown for a minute. Okay, cool. My CDs are up right now. I'm going to do a little baby breath with this pillar, and I'm going to actually have it up with lust. There's scenarios where if you actually use that to and you're like kind of adapting it as you progress a boss, as you get better at a dungeon, and you're kind of improvising based on what's happening in front of you, what level your key is, stuff like that. And there's a scenario where you'd want to use all three of them, which is proven to have happened with some empower spells that are currently in the game. That, in my opinion, would be the most fun version of Breath that's existed, or at least the best designed. That just sounds really fucking cool. Now, all in theory, right? This could all make total sense, like so many things that they've said they were gonna do before, and then it turns out it just fucking stinks, right? Maybe it stinks. I don't know, but it sounds like it's gonna be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna be one of those. It depends on the types of fights and how it's designed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that it should work out best, and the way that they are trying to make this true by giving the 2-minute version the most bang for your buck, is like the Sims should be pressing it on 2 minutes pretty much, right? If the Sims ever aren't pressing it on 2 minutes because the lineups with your pillar are better than getting more uptime of breath per second over an encounter, then I think this will have failed. But as long as the Sims are pressing it on 2 minutes, and then you are adjusting based off of, oh, this fight has damage downtime, this fight has a damage amp, Lust is coming up soon, this pack's gonna die soon, all of these things that you know might consider about a fight or a dungeon, then I think it's a huge dub. I think it actually would be like, yes, they've made empower spells that you use at different numbers before, but often that's you're kind of following like a guide, right? And the guide is saying, hey, empower your flame breath to 2 in this situation and 4 in this situation or whatever. This would be a case of like the Wowhead guide won't really be able to tell you, right? It's like you'd have to go on fight by fight, or because it's not based on your spec, it's based on this situation entirely, and like looking ahead at the next 3 minutes and figuring out where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, and that I think would be super cool. Breath would still have to be strong feeling, and I think there's definitely some worry that Breath is just going to get kind of, like Dorky said, like watered down if they just make it
that's my biggest
low
concern.
low impact, because inherently this sounds incredibly skill testing, and typically whenever Blizzard makes something inherently skill testing, they realize within 0 to 1 patches that the good Frosty Ks are now doing twice as much damage as the medium ones, and then they nerf it and they take they dumb down the spec.
The people feel bad because they have to play it and it's really hard and they don't like it, all that stuff. But like, I think it's really hard to tell because they're kind of overdoing Frosty K's entire resource economy, and that it just interacts with Breath so directly that it's just gonna be so hard to know what Breath even feels like to play.
Yeah, and we're gonna live
Frosty
in a world.
Is gonna be like basically another spec.
If you're sending a Breath 1 or a Breath 2, where Breath is gonna feel pretty different because you don't have to squeeze as hard to get a full 8 seconds of breath, right? Like, you just have to not turbo grief your runic power. Whereas with previous versions of Breath, you always wanted every single bit of runic power you could optimize out of it. But with this system where they're capping how long it can last, especially with the 1 and 2 empowers of it, it's going to feel different as well. Which, again, maybe it won't feel like Breath, where the mini game of making your breath last as long as humanly possible is going to be gone. So that might be a downside if you love that part of old Breath, which I can relate to that. But I think this is going to add more cool gameplay than it takes away.
I do think the max rank Breath should allow players to last for as long as they can, and the lower level ones should be like, it's not as good to use, but in certain situations you're gonna want to use it, right? Like if you're doing like sticks and you're not gonna make full use of your breath, you're just gonna want mini breaths for every set of ads, for example. Like, I think that would be good design.
I think it's really, really hard for them, and there's a lot of stuff to support this, but like, I bet it's infuriating to try to design Breath with it ever being potentially infinite and not knowing exactly how long good versus medium versus bad players are going to be able to keep it up. And them capping it at a long duration to where those 30 seconds will still be fun and they can tune it because they know exactly what it's going to be, right? They'll tune it for you keeping it up for 30 seconds. But like keeping it up for like a good player, if it was theoretically infinite, could keep it up for like 36. Like best RNG ever, you get a couple kicks during it, you can keep it up for 40 versus like the bad player getting 20. I think is like kind of, even though that is what we love about Breath, that is what I have loved about Breath, that is also the thing that has made it so polarizing, right? Like that you're directly tying the power of a cooldown to how good you are, which is not, true with basically anything else in the game besides like Surrender was definitely like that as well. But I mean, I guess everything is kind of like that. If you're good, you're going to do more damage, but like something directly related to like how a cooldown feels. Because like, if you ever played Breath, you feel fucking amazing when Breath is up, right? You're fucking owning, you're like fighting against the clock, and then it's over and you're like, oh, this is boring, right? And the worse you are as a player, the more boring time you have because the less you have it up. So it's like it's compounding issue, right? No wonder people wanted a Blit to be a build so bad because they just wanted to get away from this. It was so stressful.
Yeah,
So,
I think also if
yeah.
you're a Frosty K main, it's really good news if your spec doesn't become the primary PI and Lust like scaler, which you would with like if there was a strong infinite breath that really indexed a lot of your damage into it, that would make you that spec that's like does super well in those spots where you get everything stacked on you and then you get nerfed because of it. So
That exists right now with Evoker, right?
yeah, sort of. I mean, their Dragon Rage is capped on how long it can be extended, but yeah, getting PI in the opener is night and day compared to not getting it.
I mean, I just don't think it's a problem. Like, I'd much rather they just give players the option to play Oblit or Breath and just keep it at that. Because, like, I don't think they should take away something from the players who enjoy Breath and for what it is, or like water it down just so that more players can play it. They should just have other options.
Is still going to be fun.
Yeah, I think
though.
that's
like,
yeah,
that's
it'll still be fun. But
I'm a Breath enjoyer for sure. But I mean, we're gonna have these opinions, right? Like, have you ever met an amazing Shadow Priest that liked that Surrender was removed? No, because like they got the most out of that and they fucking owned, and it rewarded their skill expression. Anyone who's great at Breath is gonna be like, man, I wish Breath still allowed me to express my skill. And it's certainly likely that this will have less of that than the old version of Breath, right? But I don't know. If I'm a Blizzard designer and I've had this like Breath thing going on forever, and you can maybe find a way to have Breath still feel valuable and good and hard for like the best players, and it's not causing this massive chasm between your players that play the spec, I think that's something worth exploring. And if you're like basically reworking the spec, it's like one of the first things you're going to look at, and it's really unsurprising that they chose to really target it because it is extremely polarizing. Plus, it's going to be so hard to tell about Breath because like low-key Frosty K looks like a completely different spec.
It really is just another spec.
It's so hard to like when I think of Frosty K, I think of what like a Remorseless Winter window in a pillar feels like outside of Breath. It's the only thing I can get in my head when I'm not playing Breath, like in a Blit window, right? Like that's the only thing you can think of. But like the spec is just different now, so like you don't know how much this is going to matter. Which maybe even keeping it up for 30 seconds will be hard. Who fucking knows?
Dude, speaking of, I'm so glad they're changing that. I always hated playing Frosty K and that moment you get in the rotation where you're just like, man, I really don't want to Frost Strike, but also I really don't want to not Frost Strike. You know, you have to to, but it feels icky, and that's something that they really have targeted with this. So that's something I'm really excited to see also.
Yeah, it's hard to tell right now because like I asked my chat how Frost is, and I definitely got the heavy vibes that like none of the numerical tuning for any of this makes sense yet.
Yeah,
because they were all like, it's really bad. I'm like, what do you mean it's really bad? Like, which talent builds? Like, what are you trying? And they're like, I don't know. It all sims really bad. It like you're doing like that's not really the point. Like when you're redoing spec, you should see the stuff that should kind of work together. You can see some builds and that they should synergize. If you kind of know if you played Frosty K for a while, I haven't done this myself, so you know maybe this is impossible to do, but that's seemed easy to do with the new talent trees coming out initially. And like you should see how it plays. Like, how does this feel? The numbers when you're reworking a spec, if you've been around for the past couple of years, there's usually a couple specs that are reworked every patch. Everything is cooked. Like stuff does not make sense right away. Like stuff doesn't need to. I wouldn't try to make a build that's doing the most damage right now, even though I think it's fair to expect that you would want that because the patch is seeming probably not super far away. So like you'd rather be closer to it fully functional than not. But this is the exact kind of thing where they miss a lot of numbers. I would just definitely get the gameplay right, and then they can make all the numbers make sense, especially with how simple it looks now. They only have to tune a few buttons, right? It's not like they definitely simplified it.
Yeah, I will say this is an extremely ambitious patch because they're doing a lot of reworks and the whole tier sets too. There's gonna be a lot of balancing required, and they only have maybe like 2 months from now. So I am a little bit worried about how much they can get done in that time.
Yeah, this patch does seem huge, right? Like I think it's because the last time we had I think we learned earlier, like usually, tell me if I'm wrong, when we get PTRs, aren't they normally a little less fleshed out? Like I remember when we got the PTR for this current season that we're in, like it took like 3 or 4 weeks for the raid journal to make any sense. Like the bosses were not even fully maybe it's a Christmas break diff because they like actually take time off, which totally makes sense why it'd be less. But like we got that PTR and it was so much less complete. Like this time it came out, the bosses all like, as far as I can tell, I haven't deep dove it yet. They make sense. The loot looks like it's fully created and not like placeholder shit. And I don't know. It seems like we're 3 weeks farther in the PTR cycle, like dev cycle, by the time this released than I'm used to, right? Which kind of implies that
Yep.
it's like more ready. But that wouldn't be true with. But maybe that's why they were so ambitious. Maybe they were ahead, so they felt like, yo, we can have extra time to cook. We were just gonna do Unholy DK and this, which is why it's in the WoWcast. But we actually ended up having a lot more time to work on some other stuff, which would be a good thing. But you're right. If they bit off more than they could chew, you could feel that at the beginning of the season, right?
Yeah, there's some drastic changes, and if they don't get the balancing right, we're gonna have the first few weeks of some pretty terribly balanced encounters or classes.
Do you guys want to do? Although I will say, I feel like that is a fear that I express every single patch, and I don't know if that ever ends up actually being realized. I think it has been in the 0.5 and 0.7s. Those have definitely, even to Blizzard's own admission, has been like underprepared. But like, I feel like major patches, it's usually like this thing's gonna be so OP and this thing sucks, and like it ends up usually all just being whatever. At
Yeah,
least in raid.
I find that how much we worry about balance based on these sorts of things doesn't seem to correlate all that much with how good the balance actually is. Like,
In Mythic Plus, it is.
Yeah.
Like in Mythic, but like we all know the Mythic Plus issue. Like Mythic Plus, you being average should be fine, but it means you take 40 minutes to get invited instead of instantly, so it objectively makes your game experience worse. Like anytime Mythic Plusers complain about balance, they're valid because that's just like it's just built for you to feel terrible. But I feel like in raid, it's always fine.
Mhm. Yeah, or, the things that are not fine are a lot less of a big deal in raid than they are in M plus as well. Like, relatively bad raid balance is usually still totally. It doesn't grief as many people's experience as relatively bad M plus balance does.
Mm-hmm. Before we move on to tier sets, because we already kind of talked about like Breath of Cinder Ghost. So, what do you guys think about the DK raid buff?
Oh yeah,
Like dissertation
Oh
they
yeah,
gave.
that's
Well,
exactly the whole M plus raid situation.
before we give takes on that, I just want to, for anyone who hasn't read the notes that listens to us, what they did is they removed A-Bomb's Limb with the stated goal of A-Bomb's Limb was so OP that it made single grip way like less impactful, and it made us intentionally made mobs that would be grippable immune. So they just straight up removed A-Bomb's Limb. They kind of reworked it for Unholy to be like an AoE army option, which is kind of fun, but like generally it's just gone from the gripping thing that you know. Which alone, by the way, kind of sad. It's a really sick ability. But they said like, oh well, this will be a way for us to do that. It's gives DK. We'll now design fights with more single grippable stuff being relevant. And then we'll certainly have to discuss that because there's a lot of issues with that. And then they also addressed AMZ. They were like, the absorb thing didn't seem to make any sense. We're bringing it back to what it was originally with like a 2 minute. It used to be a 2 minute 20% DR. They nerfed it to 4 minutes with a 15% DR, but then they added a talent, which you'll almost certainly take. That makes it a 3 minute cooldown, 15% DR, which is still very good. That is like way in raid, specifically raid. I think this is probably a Mythic Plus nerf in a lot of scenarios to what it used to be because of the reduced amount of players. But in raid, this is like probably it's easily the best like utility, the raid damage defensive utility that any non-healer brings, without question. But it's certainly a lot worse than it was before. But before it was like the best ability in the game. So like I don't know, like it probably needed to be nerfed from what it was before. But I don't know. You guys can either go in either direction, either AMZ or Grip. I know I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm interested to hear what you guys think.
So first of all, they doubled down on DK's not getting a raid buff. I think that's like the biggest takeaway from this.
Mm-hmm.
They essentially made grip as a raid buff. It's like, okay, well, I mean, the whole idea behind removing A bomb limb and nerfing AMZ, well, I guess buffing AMZ in raid is to make it so that, like, all right, now you're going to want a DK specifically for grips and they can actually make grips impactful, which makes sense. Like, all of it actually makes sense. And they said it was going to happen in this new raid coming up. Like, it's going to be noticeable in a lot of fights. I would say that's for the most part a good thing. I just, again, it's one of those things where it sucks for M plus. A bomb limb was useful in M plus, and DKs still don't have the raid buff. AMZ is getting nerfed in M plus.
I didn't even think about the
So
Mythic Plus angle. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, they're straight up just losing in M plus while not getting a raid buff, and that sucks really bad. But I mean, I guess it is what it is, right? They've already doubled down on the whole they're not getting a raid buff situation.
I didn't even think about that in Mythic Plus because like yeah, they're like AMZ. is like objectively nerfed in Mythic Plus, right? I'm pretty sure most
Yeah.
times you popped AMZ in Mythic Plus, it did not get fully absorbed, or at least got most of
It's
the way
very
there.
rare. Yeah.
Yeah, so like so at Mythic Plus is just objectively worse AMZ, and they lose A-Bomb's limit. It's just a huge Mythic Plus in quotes raid buff thing. But Dratnos, what about the actual raid buff side of things?
Yeah, so I mean, you could design fights such that Death Grip is good. It's tough for me. Like, the thing that I'm a little bit worried about now is Blood DK versus Unholy and Frost, because Blood DK still has Gorfien's Grip, like Mass Grip, and Blood DK has a shorter cooldown, longer range single grip. So it's really hard for me to imagine you designing a fight where Death Grip is important, but Blood DK isn't way better at doing the Death Grip jobs on that fight than Unholy and Frost. So that's something I'm looking at. It is definitely going to be good though if they actually make things that would be grippable. I think to me the most egregious example from Liberation of Undermine is Mugsy, the Rocketeers. Those things not being grippable is just like such a question mark to me. And that one you can't even explain with like, oh, A-Bomb Limb would trivialize this. There's only one of them out at a time. Like A-Bomb Limb would literally be worse than Death Grip at controlling those things. So yeah, hopefully that philosophy switch is good. I could see that being good for Death Knights in Raid. I think it's likely that we're going to move to Blood DK being a default tank option and still not seeing default DPS DKs in Raid. But you know, obviously that is pending tuning, right? Like DK always gets a spot if the tuning is good. So I don't think that this is necessarily going to accomplish the thing they want of making DK have a good spot that is likely to happen every tier without good tuning. I think they just need to give it a raid buff for that. So I really think they should still give it a raid buff. I think it's not too late.
I thought they did. It like when I first read the thing, I saw this massive paragraph talking about like I saw the words AMZ, I saw the words grip, and I'm like, and then the very first thing it says before the dev note paragraph is new talent increases haste by 2%.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, they get it. They gave DK a 2% raid wide haste buff. They finally saw the light. And then randomly it's only for them. And it just randomly they put it at the very top right above the dev note, which was so confusing.
Yeah.
So if they want a solution to their problems, Blizzard, just make that raid wide. GG, it's over, and you fixed it, right?
Yeah.
It also would be good for Mythic Plus as well. But you hit the nail on the head. Part of my job is to, if there's a boss that requires grips, it is my job to solve the most efficient way to do that. And I'll tell you right now, the very first way we are going to approach any of that is, can we play 2 Blood DKs? No question. It used to be that their AMZ was better for some reason. I'm glad that's no longer a thing anymore. But I actually think with this change, they have actually, in a way, they have increased the gap that has existed between DPS DK and tank DK, which was already a big problem. There was the problem of you don't want to DK at all. That was a problem as well. But within that, if you play DK, you know, it's like, why wouldn't we just bring a Blood DK? They're just twice as good at this, right? You haven't even seen Gorfien's Grasp outside of 2 bosses in the last like couple years be used, Mass Grip, because A-Bomb's Limb is the single solution to anytime anything needs to get gripped. It was such a good button, but they both had it. So when we played, I went back and looked. When we played DK DPS a few times, it was because you just needed 1 A-Bombs, or you needed a certain amount of A-Bombs, and that came from both roles. So you could just bring a DK DPS at the same time as you brought a DK tank. Now with A-Bombs removed, and it's about single grip, which is fine, right? But Blood DK single grip is, I think, almost, you could argue, twice as good as DK DPS single grip. So there, right away, you have the enhanced problem, which you solved, by the way. Why did Shamans get a raid buff? Well, there was a Shaman every single time. So they do have a raid buff, right? No, only Enhance had it for years. So what did they do? They gave them, was it called Sky Fury, right? A crazy good raid buff that is really good. Okay, cool. You solved the problem. Now you can bring any Shaman. Great. How is that not being applied to Death Knights, right? Like the thing you were stating to bring them to the raid for is way better. Now, and they're also running into another issue where they kind of have an Evoker raid buff. And what I mean by that is Evokers do have a hour-long raid buff that applies to everyone, Blessing of the Bronze, but that is not, in my opinion, that is not the reason that at least I would ever bring an Evoker. All of the reasons, and you do still bring an Evoker because it turns out all the utility they have is very, very strong, and having at least one of them. But then, interestingly enough, where you can't bring 2 mages and get double the Arcade Intellect, the reason you bring an Evoker is stackable. So you can bring multiple Time Dials, multiple Renewing Blazes, multiple Zephyrs, and Time Spirals, and all this shit, right? DKs are now like that. So if grips are really good, you can now add a second DK, and you get basically double the raid buff value. You get the second AMZ, Like most of DK's power, or all of it, is coming in things that you can bring multiple of, right? And I find that to be an interesting solution. It kind of works for Evokers, right? Evokers are a proven model that like you can solve a raid buff issue by not having to give them an hour-long thing, even though they literally have one. It's just not why you bring them. But it's really hard to do that. I think they're making their job so much harder than it needs to be, for the reason of, well, we don't have to solve this nuanced raid buff problem with something like an hour-long raid buff. It's like you don't, but like you really should, because it just fucking removes the issue. Now, that being said, let's say they did that right now. Let's say DK's Blood, Frost, Unholy, they give a 2% haste buff to everyone in the raid. Okay. You still would rather have that person be a Blood DK, right? I don't know how they solve that problem. Because like,
well, not necessarily, right? Like, what if it's like Vistir, for example, where Blood Decay is just not as good as the other tanks?
I mean, okay, but you have to remove tuning them, right? Like, you have to remove the argument of tuning, because then you could say, like, well,
okay.
why does it matter if Blood DK is better at this? Because Frost and Unholy are super crazy and Blood sucks. So it's like, yeah, okay, but isn't the whole reason we've gotten to this point?
Well, I mean, actually, can we say that for the rest of the classes too? Like, why would you ever bring a Red Paladin if Holy Paladin and Prot Paladin are generally better brought? Because like, you know, Prot Paladin does have spell warding, and
and that's part of the reason why you do see Prot Paladins much more than
that's mainly just a Prot Paladin thing, because like you could argue that, I mean, that's kind of the same with Blood DK as well. Mastery, but like another healer also that you would replace them with also has like a aura mastery type thing. But you know, you're right. I mean, there's other imbalances, but not if they're gonna make grips. They specifically mentioned single grip. We want to make single grip important, bro. A single Blood DK, if that is why you want to bring them, is arguably worth 2 DPS DKs. And that's not even including the fact that they can mass grip, which again, if you guys play at a high level, you'll know a lot of times you don't actually even play mass grip, even when you want to bring a Blood DK, mostly because A-bombs exist. With A-bombs removed, mass grip infinitely gains value, by the way. It is going to be significantly better. Even if it's if they're making single grip so important, it's a panic single grip every minute and a half, which has value alone, not even gripping a bunch of things. So, I mean, it's like arguably better than 2 DPS DKs as far as that is concerned. Tuning aside, right? But we want to get away from the tuning aside thing. Like, I don't know, and I don't really know how they solve it. Do you nerf Blood DK? Like, Blood DK grip, is that the solution? Probably not, right?
I think
like,
you should at least make DPS DKs have the same grip length and CD as tank DK.
I can already see next week's PTR development notes. Blood DK grip increased to 30-second cooldown, and
yeah, I think that's a bad change.
They are not going to be happy about it.
I think it's a bad change. Like, I imagine this is a PvP issue. Something tells me that like DPS DKs having a shorter grip in threes is just like.
Oh yeah, that'd be broken as hell. 15-second cooldown.
Okay, you just nerf their damage in half, and then give them a hero talent that doubles their damage but makes their grip nerfed. Bang.
They're happy.
PvP talent.
Yeah. Like, we don't. This is a nuanced problem. It requires a nuanced solution. Because even if you give them the default raid buff, right, it's still. Blood is just so much better. Not to mention that if you're talking raid specifically, which we mentioned the Mythic Plus issues, Blood is a historically amazing raid tank. They're just great at raid tank, and they got even better today with Warriors losing spell block. So they're like, you know, that's something that and everyone plays one too. So you just slot that in and it's easy. And I think that's just going to be the solution, barring tuning. I just wish they'd. Do you give DPS DK's mass grip? It's weird because like mass grip, they'd have to put it in the class tree or they'd have to make it baseline because.
Okay. Like, what about this? What if tank Blood DK keeps their short grip, but they lose mass grip, and DK DPS gets mass grip?
Yeah.
Ooh.
That can work.
Wait, that is. Dorky, you're fucking cooking.
That would be amazing for M+ too. Like, imagine your DK DPS having mass grip. That is like so valuable.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue. I would argue in even. By the way, they're not going to do this, but like, I would argue in even most raid situations, like having a shorter single grip, if that's what they're focusing on, versus having mass grip at all, would most likely cancel each other out. Like, you'd find scenarios for both.
Yeah, they'd be about the same.
That would actually low-key fix this, but that would just be so strange that specifically is the fix. Like, oh, by the way, Blood DK, you get this. Like, it would just feel bad to be a Blood DK. I also think there's like nerfs, just DKs versus other people. Certainly in Mythic Plus, but also in Raid. Like, bro, A-bombs was so cool and totally broken. And the
Also
reality
fucking
is,
annoying too. The amount of times A-Bomb Limb has griefed over all
Dude.
these years is like way too high.
We even have
It's
we have it in the
such a
dungeon
grief
pool right
ability.
now. The brew boss in Cinder Brew. First time you go in there on a DK and you hit A-Bomb Limb and just grip the droplets into the boss. That's an
Yeah.
event that every DK has done exactly once.
Atlas fucking fat fingered A bombs.
I remember that.
On our, yeah,
Ansarek.
on our fucking Ashara
Yeah.
fucking Ansarek frog. It was like an hour before we killed it, and we were on our best pull ever, and he fucking A-bombed on
I remember that
accident
too, yeah.
for the first time ever in that phase, and fucking killed us by gripping us.
It does no fucking damage too. It's just one of those
He literally
things that's
dragged it off
muscle
his bar.
memory. Yeah.
Yep. I remember Rygalon as well. You'd press it and just grief the raid. Yeah. Good times. I agree. It's kind of sad to see it go, although I do think the power that it brought was it is just hard to design things to be grippable and not make A-Bomb limbs super broken against them. So I think taking it away is probably good for like making the fights easier to design and balance.
Yeah, that's yet to be seen.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I think theoretically, I think you're right. Like, so another way they could do this, and I don't think this is a problem for the future because they'd forget about this eventually, but they could design it this tier to where single grip is good, and they mentioned like we don't need a million mobs spawning, so what would have been A-Bomb's Limb or Mass Grip is good. But like specifically single grip is good. So in my mind, I just picture a mob or two that need to die, and they spawn away from the boss, and it'd be really fucking cool if we could grip them like on the boss and then beat the shit out of them. That is, but if that only happens once a minute, then Blood DK and DPS DK grip is identical.
Right.
Because you have the amount of grips to do both of those things. But okay, so then that's like super one-dimensional. Then it's like, okay, so every time you spawn a bunch of ads, you now they're not mass grippable, and it's like, okay, like I guess, okay, and then later on, are they always gonna make it to where DPS and tank DK grips are identical in value? And even then, mass grip still exists, which like in reality, like if they ever spawn more than 2 ads, mass grip just gaps the other thing, you know? So what do they do?
This kind of reminds me, you remember when we talked about Evoker range being a big issue for the spec when it was first announced and going into Vault of the Incarnates? And then Blizzard just designed every fight in Vault of the Incarnates so that the range wasn't an issue and the Evoker movement suite was super valuable.
This is a perfect analogy. Yeah,
and
that's
then
exactly right.
It's like, okay, well, clearly they can do this. But then that's actually not a long-term solution because they were trying to do it that tier and they were, it was a goal for them. And that's just not something that is reliably going to happen every tier. And then you get some fights like Naimu or whatever in Amir Drasil where Evokers are just in the trenches with their 25-yard range, or this tier even has a lot of fights where Evoker range feels very annoying. So it's, if their plan is to make this balanced by having it be something that they just always think about and design perfectly every fight, that's great. But in addition to limiting their design space, as you mentioned, it's also just something that's very hard to sustain tier over tier because there's already so many variables that they're trying to balance with these fights.
This game's so hard to tune. It's so hard. It's clearly like fucking like this league, other games with that have been out forever that have infinite classes and stuff. Like you're already doing something that's impossible. Why make it that much harder? Just give in, man. Give them a little something.
Yeah, the 2% haste thing is such a bait as well. I had the exact same thing.
Are you gonna have grippable ads on every single fight ever where you don't want to sit a DK ever? Are they going at this from the angle of, well, the important bosses will have one, so you want to have one in to get them geared? That doesn't always play out that way, you know? And
especially if it's blood DK, because you don't need to gear them.
No, exactly. You log on an alt blood DK rather than You're 100% right. Yeah.
Yeah, part of the reason why the game is so hard to balance is because they create all these problems for themselves, which is why I'm really glad they're making solutions like removing A-Bomb Limb or removing Spell Block. I do think the game has gotten extremely bloated over the years, and for them to take the stance of like, okay, these have been problematic, like let's just get rid of them, I think that's the appropriate response. And like even though like people have been sad about it, right? Like it makes sense because if you give classes all these cool abilities, like if you give them A-Bomb Limb, if you give them Spell Block, it's like, wow, this is really nice to have, but when you take it away, obviously it's going to feel bad. But I think it's a necessary evil, especially with the whole Spell Block situation, which we can talk about in a second.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, let's just go into that because that's another like class change adjacent thing. What do you guys think about?
Yeah, so
go ahead.
The dev note was not what I wanted to hear. They said they removed it because it required too much specialized knowledge, which is like, bro, I mean, that's kind of why you play the game, right? I mean, like, can't you say the same about like AMS or what's that monk ability called? Diffuse Magic, and same with just like many other abilities, right?
Yeah. You don't
Yeah,
know
like you don't know
what
exactly
can
what you
use.
can. Yeah, or like shadow meld. Hey, that's another topic we talk about later too. Like we don't know that it's intended that you can shadow meld this one boss mechanic and just make it not do anything. But it is what it is, right? So I would say it's good that spell block got removed because spell block made Prot Warrior way too binary. The class was either unkillable if you could block the damage, like if there's blockable spells or blockable physical attacks, you literally took 0 damage. But outside of that, if there's like dot damage or bleed damage or constant magic damage that just like is AoE and can't be spell blocked, you were fucked. You had nothing you could have done as a Prot Warrior. So for them to remove spell block and I mean that would require them to do something different, right? Like they would have to either readjust Prot Warrior to actually be able to survive these types of encounters without spell block, or they would have to change the encounters to be suitable to a warrior without spell block.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a fair, like, if your read on this is, oh man, it sucks that warriors are going to die now because their magic defense was like predicated on spell block. First of all, that wasn't even true in raid, but in M plus it was sort of true. Although really in M plus, like, you had to survive the 66% of the time that spell block wasn't up, right? So you did have to live outside of that. I think it's also fair to be mad that Blizzard took away spell block and they added in one of the most like uninspired and awful looking talents ever with like you have a 4%
Oh yeah,
chance to
that's
just
just bad.
not take magic
Yeah,
damage.
you basically have 4% magic parry is what that
Yeah,
read.
that talent is like offensive, right? Like if you're
It's
a prop
criminally
warrior and
bad.
you're reading that thing, you're just like, man, this is the
It's
worst
so
day of my
interesting.
life.
I was actually really interested when reading that because like you could think of technically with like a bunch of damage events having a 4% chance to reduce all of the damage from something over a long period of time is just a 4% magic passive DR, which isn't bad, but that's also like not how magic damage is dealt to you, right? Like you usually aren't taking massive dot as a tank, like massive magic dot damage. That's like the dot damage that you take, like the way your health goes down like that is usually physical. It's like a bunch of auto attacks. But like magic damage is usually fucking you. It's like one big hit or it's like a bunch of casts. And like you getting one of them fully reduced is way worse than like a 4% passive DR, for example, specifically for magic. I think for melee stuff, like parry ends up averaging out because you're just getting hit so much. But it just feels way worse because it's magic.
Yeah.
But yeah, that aside, I agree. Like spell block was not healthy for warriors or for
Yeah, it
the
was not
game.
healthy for the game.
It just
Right.
currently there is a worse thing that they've got on PTR, but they could do a lot better than both that and spell block if they.
Have you played Prot Warrior at all? Can you even do content on PTR right now that's trying to kill you?
Not really.
Yeah, so it's
I
hard
mean,
to tell
I've
because
heard
like,
you can do it. Yeah.
was there more things changed about Prot Warrior? It's
Yeah.
possible that they're making up
Oh
for
yeah,
that in
their
the
entire
as
tree
well.
is changed, but it doesn't really like address the problem.
So I think we
It's more
kind of
like-
have to. I think we have to push a lot of the major rework stuff from like. We just need to like do, especially as tanks. This DPS, you can kind of hit a dummy and get the vibe, you know.
Yeah.
But like as a tank, like unless you're doing content that's trying to kill you, it's really really hard to see how good or bad changes are.
The thing about Prot Warriors, it heavily depends on the encounter. I mean, this kind of reminds me of the whole add-on situation. Like I've been saying how like it's good for Blizzard to be removing a lot of these combat add-ons, but obviously everyone doesn't trust Blizzard to make the right decisions, and the encounters are still going to be as awful. And it's kind of like the same with Prot Warrior right now, right? Because like we don't know what Prot Warriors are going to have to deal with next season. If it's anything like this season, I mean, they are bringing back Priory after all. You literally cannot get past the first boss in Priory because it's just like non-stop bleed damage. It's just not built for Prot Warrior. Because Prot Warrior would have actually been really good this patch. But the class was played in Raid a lot for a very good reason. Like the class just fucking owns, right? Like it does a lot of damage and it's pretty damn tanky. But when you come across certain encounters like the ones in Priory, you're just fucked. There's nothing you can do about it. The class is just hard gated by the first boss, and that's not a good feeling.
Yeah. So I guess it's hopefully they'll land it in a better spot than it is in now, and I think taking away spell block is part of that. But I also think that so far what they've been doing is looking worse than or not better necessarily. Yeah.
Some other good things though, just like minor class change stuff. They before we get into tier sets, they made Killing Spree like controllable.
Oh God, it's so
which
cool.
Is massive W.
It's a Reaper ult. Yeah.
You're just like
Wait, what do you
blasting.
mean Reaper ults?
Like you literally,
you spin
it doesn't
around.
move you anymore. You just press it and you just are shooting
You're
and
blasting, bro.
blasting, and you spend all your combo points, but you build them back up while it's channeling. and you can
I
move
see.
while doing it, and you can press like some defensive and movement abilities while channeling it as well.
So it's almost like Blade Storm, except your
It's in front of you instead of around you,
Yeah.
and it's yeah. I mean, I think so. I think he's right. Right? That's
Yeah, it's God, what else is it like? It's not really. I think Reaper Ult is the closest thing to it if you played Overwatch.
yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sick.
Okay, I think that. What did you guys think of the tier?
Interesting. My suspicion is it's not going to be particularly great gameplay in most cases. Like most of the set bonuses I read, I've felt pretty uninspired by. There's like 5 or 10 that are super sick.
Especially as a tank. Do you mean all of them, or like I thought the tank ones specifically are really
Yeah, well, because it's so hard to like most of the ones that overlap tank versus DPS. It's like
they just made it for DPS.
it's yeah, exactly. And there were a few where it's like, oh, there were a few where I looked at it and was like, oh, one of these is a damage proc, and the other one gives me a bunch of haste or mastery or something like that. Like, presumably that's going to be the one that scales better into harder content because that gives me a defensive value. And the other one doesn't.
Well, tanks have always been so like the tier sets for tanks are potentially so powerful that it defines the tank you're playing in the patch more often than not, right? So maybe what they're thinking, this is giving them a lot of credit here, is like if the tank ones are just like they give you a little bit of damage. So basically the overall value of the tank tier set is just you don't expect it to be super crazy because they're all like really mid. Then maybe tank balance is easier to obtain because you don't have to hit the RNG lotto of your tier set. But then there's so many holes in that thinking. Like, okay, so let's make your tier set not fun and cool and interesting like you've expected it to be. So when you log in and get this new 4 set, you just don't care. Is that worth the balance? Like, probably not. That sucks, right? So I don't know. I thought the tank ones were extremely underwhelming, but some of them for DPS are fucking crazy.
Like actually there's one tank one that's cool, and that's also a DPS one is the Paladin double hammer. That's gonna be sick.
Oh yeah.
That one's gonna be super fun. But a lot of them kind of so okay. Something about hero talents that I don't like is that it makes your spec all about just pressing your big damagey button, right?
Dude,
like,
exactly. Yep.
Like
I
you
was
think
gonna
about the
say that,
demolish
yeah.
one, for instance, right? Prot Warrior is already all of my damage comes from demolish. All of my fun comes when I press demolish.
Yep.
Making it so that that's even more true, which is like the set bonus is basically just your demolish does more damage and it gives you a buff afterwards that makes you do more damage, and like that is moving the spec even further in a direction I don't like, which is just based all around that hero talent button. So that to me, I think is the part that I'm least excited about. It's just like I love hero talents or I love set bonuses that change my gameplay in a fun and interesting way. And it doesn't seem like a lot of these do that because a lot of them just make my hero talent big damagey button an even bigger damagey button.
That's exactly what I said when we talked about tank threat. I was saying how too much of our class's damage or capability comes from these very specific things, which is like the hero talents, and it's going to be even more so true. Like Eldrazi Vengeance Demon Hunter, for example, their tier set is literally just doubling the Fury of Eldrazi damage. So, I mean, it's going to be a little bit more than double actually, because the other part of the tier set increases your physical damage by 30%. So now you just have Fury of Eldrazi doing like literally 40% of your damage in AoE. So how the hell are you expected to get any aggro or do any remotely decent damage by just hitting buttons like Immolation Aura or Soul Cleave or Spirit Bomb? Like all those abilities are literally worthless now. It literally all comes down to how big your hero talent abilities are, which is cool in a sense, but it also just creates such a problematic game design.
Yeah, because just like there's not any gameplay that's based around like, oh, when should I use my hero talent button, right? Like you think about Spirit Bomb, there's a lot of interesting gameplay about when should I press Spirit Bomb, right? Most rotational abilities, that's true, is you can kind of shift them up and down in priority lists, but the hero talent buttons are already all at a point where it's like, oh, this button is lit up, I should press it. So making it stronger with the set bonus doesn't change the gameplay in any interesting way. It just makes it even more correct to press it every time it lights up.
Yeah,
it doubles down their weaknesses too, on top of their strengths.
This is a little bit of a tangent, but what did you guys think? So this is 2 tiers in a row now where they have done something completely brand new with tier sets, right? Like last year they did the like, there's basically 4 tier sets and we've just kind of slightly altered them for every class. Before I ask about this one, I actually just in retrospect, what did you guys think how last year's tier sets played out?
I would say largely awful.
I think the tank ones definitely sucked. Like, there were a few tank ones where No, not really. There weren't really any tank ones that I enjoyed, and I played a lot of tank this season. When I played my range DPS classes, I did enjoy it though. Like proccing jackpots was actually fun. The MM one was fun enough that they're just making it baseline, although that's it was kind of a weird interaction. It wasn't so much about the jackpot thing. So yeah, I liked jackpot. A couple of the winning streaks were fun. Rep Pally had a fun one again as well. The luck of the draw sucked. I think insurance kind of sucked as well.
But overall,
so overall
worse, worse than a regular tier set patch.
But I think even though people called it like boring and uninteresting or whatever and like low effort, I don't think that was a fair criticism of doing it that way. I actually think that it was a reasonably high amount of effort to try and design, you know, set bonus for every spec with the restriction that it had to clue into, you know, jackpot or luck of the heart of the cards, whatever, luck of the draw. So yeah, I think they landed on an unfortunate decision for luck of the draw in particular, winning streak to a lesser extent, insurance to a lesser extent. Jackpot was cool. Doing something interesting and different was cool. And that's part of the reason why I don't want to be too critical about the hero talent ones either, is like, okay, they're doing something new with set bonuses. Even if it doesn't work out, I just like that they're doing something new. We've had 28 tiers or however many, 30 tiers. It's 33 tiers or something of raids and set bonuses at this point. Doing new stuff with it. I'm basically always going to be down for the first time they try something new. If they ran back luck of the draw again, I would be very unhappy.
So this is a bit of a tangent, but they really need to fix bad interactions. My interaction with the tier set this season is Boomkins proccing their tier set, which is a mushroom proc randomly. That'll just slow the mobs for 50%. It'll randomly pull stuff. It'll randomly break CC. It was just terrible. So like that type of shit needs to be fixed. Or just like even random stuff like Arcane Orbs, because Arcane Mage is meta this season. And that class is just non-stop pulling stuff with either shifting power or arcane orb, and that is like extremely infuriating. I just wish those types of interactions would get addressed immediately, since it's like it's super impactful. There's nothing worse than losing your dungeon run to some random bullshit ninja pulling.
Oh yeah.
In fact, like, it's a thing with the belt. This that just came out last week. The belt, the charged bolt proc actually just breaks CCs and ninja pulls and stuff.
There's something
like that should not be a thing.
Patch. Those are infuriating wipes because it's just
and they don't get fixed too. It's like like that needs to be addressed.
The charge bolts by nerfing it by 62% or something, so it's not going to be nobody's going to wear it anymore. The mission accomplished.
That's how you do it right there. That's some good shit.
They are changing the orb as well, but yeah, I agree with you. Whenever stuff's like rando ninja pulling stuff, that
play for the Michelob Ultra.
Is that I wish that was a higher priority of getting fixed as well.
Yeah, because it happens a lot too.
Yeah.
It's part of your regular gameplay.
Yeah. One thing I noticed when reading the tier sets today is like I would read one, I'm like, oh man, that stinks. And then the next one, within the same spec, was like, holy fuck, that owns. And vice versa. I read the first one, that thing owns. The next one, it's kind of whatever. And then I was thinking, we mentioned that they were going to do this. Actually, we thought they were going to do this in season 1 when we were talking about this before the expansion. That like, oh dude, they're totally going to do like hero talent tier sets. And they didn't do it initially. They didn't do it last year, and they're finally doing it. One thing I didn't, when we talked about this before, I never anticipated the fact that this now, for the first time ever, while yes, we are getting 39 tier sets, it's also the first time where every spec gets 2 chances at getting a good one.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. Like when I was reading them, it's like before you just read your tier set and you're like, man, that's it. But like now you get like twice the chances of popping off or not getting fucked. As long as you are okay with playing both hero talents. Right. I know for some classes, like you'd rather play one than the other, or one is currently better than the other.
That's like Sandlane and Ryder right now. Like people want to play Ryder bad, but Sandlane is just so much better.
Dude, Ryder, the first time DKs are playing Ryder and it's meta, the 10-second horse death's advance thing it's absolutely fucking insane.
Cool.
Yeah, it's so cool.
It's so good too in Raid. Like holy shit, it's
good.
The
Ryder's episode looks pretty sick as well. It's like gonna make your CDs even more
crazy.
Could
you imagine Ryder on the last boss of this next raid where he's as big as fucking Stormwind and his platform is just enormous? I mean, he's so good, but I just found that interesting that it seemed like,
because it is still only 39 bonuses, but now every spec has a choice. So that is a cool, unprecedented thing about doing it this way.
Yeah, there's no worse feeling than like knowing your tier stinks and it's not going anywhere, you know. And it's just you're just a bit less likely for that to happen now.
Yeah.
It is harder to balance though, because there are
Certainly.
more combinations. Like, how do you balance 39 specs with two different, whatchamacallit, hero talents each?
I mean, the
That's gonna be
reality is,
tough.
you go based off of complaints, and people are just way less likely to complain if one of them is great. Like honestly, there's a world where like some of the tier bonuses are actually useless for a bunch of specs, but you don't hear anyone typing about it because they're playing the other one and it fucking slaps, so they don't
Yeah.
care.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, if you're Blizzard, you start off by making sure all 6 mage combos are good, and then you go by whoever's
Yeah,
complaining
that's a
the loudest
classic.
on the
Bro.
forums for all the other ones.
Did you read the Frost and Fire, the Frostfire one? Holy fuck!
Yeah, igniting glacial spikes.
Yeah, yeah. Fire Mage is shooting out glacial spikes every time they pyro, and Frost Mage has ignite. Like that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Like that's just, and it's cool. It's
Yeah.
fucking crazy thematic. Like yeah, like they really cooked there. But I don't know that. I'm kind of optimistic about it. I don't know if they're going to continue doing it, but I'm definitely a fan after reading them. I also think they made a lot of like they made more of like way broken ones than normal. At least just upon reading it, it seemed like there were more that were like, holy fuck, that's crazy. There's really only like 2 of those a season. Really, I read like 8 of those today. The only thing that's a problem, I think tanks got hit the hardest though. Like when I read the tank one, the average tank one was like, okay, you read the DPS spec version of this that they're sharing it with, and it's just some basic ass like you do more damage, and then they just gave that to tanks. But what tanks are used to, tanks can multi-class. So like, just like right now, you have 2. If you just play one spec in the game, for example, you have 2 chances of getting great tier. Every tier, kind of, tanks have 6 chances of having insane tier because they'll just play whatever tank is going crazy at that time, right? But now, like, what do tanks have to look forward to with tier? Some like regurgitated DPS version that like barely interacts with your spec and just does a little bit of damage outside of like one of them. Like that's fucking lame. I don't think it's worked out well for tanks at all. The healers look like they have fucking crazy ones. And tanks don't seem that way at all.
Yeah, a lot of the tank ones are like lower proc rate versions of the DPS ones as well, which like that looks like it's going to be really unfun. So definitely some got the short end of the stick here, but again,
I think they need to add some
optimistic.
DR. They need to add some DR to the tank ones, just baseline all of them. I know that's opening up the like some of them are going to be crazy and it could define the tank thing, but I also think that is a better problem to have than tanks don't care about their tier. Like they get a 2 and 4 set and it's just like nothing matters. That's dumb. I don't know. I think you'd take one being OP every tier or 2 rather than that.
Yeah, this is the first time we've had impactful tier sets since like season 3 Dragonflight or some shit. And yeah, like you said, a lot of the tanks are just not that impactful.
Yeah.
But some are fucking awesome.
All right, what else do we have? We have tier sets. And anything to cook on with like the cloak? Got the BFA cloak again. Is there anything there other than like, hey, that's a thing?
Do not use your last
I didn't
dinar
even look at
purchase
it.
on the Sprocket Monger cloak. That's if you were thinking about maybe doing that, that's now banned. Do not do that.
I don't think it really matters, does it?
Well, you know, if you have like 2 mediocre choices that you might carry into next season, pick the other one now. Don't pick the cloak because you're definitely not wearing that cloak because you're wearing the artifact one.
Well, so what even is the cloak? I actually haven't really looked into too much. Like, does it even really do anything special?
Yeah,
Or is it just something you grind?
So it's like Warbound, which is going to be cool. And then it has like an interaction. It has interactions in the raid and in dungeons, which we don't know what they are yet, and in keys somehow too, or in delves also, which yeah, obviously.
Yeah, I'm a fan of this, by the way. We've been asking, hey, you don't need to have expansions defined by borrowed power. That was an issue. But hey, at the end of these patches, give us a little something. Maybe at the end of this expansion, give us a little something. Borrowed power had its issues, but it also defined some of the best times to ever exist in this game. Almost the majority of Legion, especially the end of BFA, you can directly point to the borrowed power things they added to the game as a major reason why those were some of the best times to ever play World of Warcraft. Them adding a little borrowed power cloak, yeah, we're going to lose it when we level up next expansion. That's true. That was part of the downside. But hey, we can have like, what is it? What this comes out in next month? We don't know how long it's gonna be. What, like 6 to 8 months of going on some crazy shit if the cloak is really cool? Like, I think they should be doing stuff like this in the last patch. That's my take.
And making it so that it's account bound, like fully, is so good. Because a lot of these systems have been something where, like, if you think about the BFA cloak, that was a reason to not roll an alt, was because that cloak existed. Whereas this one is going to be a reason to play an alt because you have a powerful cloak that you can just put on and start blasting. So I think that's going to be really sick.
My problem with all these recent grinds is they're all so uninspiring. So, like, we got the belt.
Make a pit stop for one of 4 delicious $7 Phillips from KFC and see F1 the movie in theaters June 27th.
It's just the dog shit proc, doesn't really do anything. We got the Vision Enchants, which again doesn't really do anything, it's just a proc. And we got... Well, what else did we get?
Boring. They're nothing
they're all boring. Yeah, like I want something that actually has substance. It actually does something.
So this one, it has like procs, and then I think the way that the power is going to work from it is that there will be like boss mechanics that the flavor of them is that you're using your cloak on them. It's not actually an extra, like, it's not an ability that the cloak gives you, but it's like you have an extra action button on a boss fight, and that is from your cloak or something like that. Or like there's a mechanic that
that's interesting.
In theory is because your cloak is giving you the ability to see, you know, the ethereal realm or whatever it is, which I think is kind of I agree it's less cool than like essences or corruption or any of that stuff was, but to me it's still it's enough. It's enough exciting looking that I'm excited about it. Mostly the
personally I just want something that alters your gameplay.
Yeah, I agree that would be the ideal. Okay, in lieu of a Patreon question this week, we will take a look at this Wowhead interview. You want to do the first question of part 1 or part 2?
Well, Dorky was the one who brought it up. Which one did you think was really interesting, Dorky?
So, one of them talks about tank threat. One of them talks about how the Season 2 dungeons are being designed, the stop changes, resilient keys, needing on every item in LFG, which we actually talked about on our podcast.
Dude, one that I think is really interesting is that what they say right away is, like, Wowhead's very first question is like, Mythic Gallywix was a disappointment, huh? Basically.
Yeah.
And then their response was, well, basically outside of the Race World First, everyone thought the difficulty was fine. That's like their just immediate response, which is
feedback has been largely positive, and they've been...
Yeah. I think that it's definitely true that Gallywix level difficulty fights are going to be more popular than Ansarek difficulty fights among the overwhelming majority of players. I will dispute that everybody liked Gallywix. At least, again, maybe just my guild is close enough to the high end but like the experience of range players just sitting there and actually doing nothing for the last 3 minutes of the fight was not particularly satisfying for the range players that I know. Most of like phase 1 was pretty fun, enjoyable, I think, for almost everybody, and then the phase 2 melee experience is pretty good, and fight looked good, yeah. So, and it's definitely, I think it definitely causes more damage to make fights too hard than too easy, so it makes sense to err on that side.
It's just crazy from my perspective. Like, what I hear is like, okay, so that statement you just said, I completely agree with, by the way. Like, the majority of the Mythic WoW raiding scene would like a boss to be closer to Gallywix than it was to Ansarek. I said those exact words after this raid, and people got so mad at me. Like, the chat, which is mostly like the people who are still listening at that point are just like race fans, right? And they're upset because they're like, I didn't get to watch this cool thing. But like, I was like, you guys aren't who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people actually clearing the raid. And I thought that made sense. I don't know why I'm like just vindicating myself, but I said this before.
Yeah, I mean, if the Blizzard devs agreed with you, I guess.
I must be right.
So, one of the really rough answers was, are there any plans to change the way Mythic Lockout works? And they said no plans are announced, and they're happy with how it works. And they said what you pretty much said about the whole lockout, right? Like, they want communities to stay together and how players should have social interactions amongst each other and be tied to their group. So
it's a tough way to do that, but yeah, it makes sense.
I mean, they did say they would love to hear feedback. So I mean, as long as you guys are loud enough about the whole Mythic raid lockout situation, maybe they'll change their opinions.
They've been asked about it straight to their face in interviews for like 3 years. Like I don't think it's ever going to change, because there's like, what other way? They would need another way to very securely maintain the social balance of WoW and like wanting you to make those, like they want you, even though there's friction, to make those connections because they know their game is better enjoyed like that. And that is what the Mythic Lockout, among other things, does. And that's clearly stated by them why they're not getting rid of it. But it, like, there's so many actual gameplay reasons why it turbo sucks and lowers overall like involvement in Mythic. So it's like, you're basically like, do you want more involvement in Mythic, or do you want like the entire social construct of the game over years to potentially just evolve into people solo queuing for things and not actually talking to people? And Blizzard's probably a lot more scared of that than they are the negative consequences of the Mythic Lockout. It makes sense.
Yeah. Dude, the other thing in the part 1 of the interview, the Dead Week is getting changed. You can get a lot of champion track gear.
W.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a huge
We
W.
complained about that infinitely, right?
Yeah.
That like that week just felt totally.
Yeah, there's nothing to do.
Yeah, and now I think they're striking the correct balance of, it's not nothing, but it's also not, you know, the BFA week ones where you have to play 16 hours a day of islands.
It's weekly lockout Mythic Zeros, right?
Yeah.
Like the only people who are going to potentially be really stressed out about this are Race World First Raters who have to do a Mythic Zero tour 15 plus times. Those people, unrelatable, doesn't matter to a lot of people listening to this. That is definitely going to suck.
Yeah.
But for the average person, I think this is very good. You just get a little bit of a 2 to 3 character average person or less, like that. You're talking you just have more stuff to do, more fun. You're gaining that little carrot on the stick early.
100%. Yes, that is a huge W.
What'd they say about Resilient?
Basically,
they
we
said
like
they were
them.
fine with
They're not changing them
Yeah.
for this season.
I have a question. Why do Resilient Keys not exist from the beginning of Mythic Plus, if they exist at 12?
It's a good question. Yeah. So I also am of the opinion that they actually would probably work really well for people below 12s. We got a lot of one of you guys got a lot of flack in the comments for saying that like people who are 3K don't really interact with Resilient, which obviously it's not technically true. Like you do technically get Resilient keys at, you know, 29.70 or whatever if you've done all the keys equally. But it is also true that if you're pushing 12s, you don't have Resilient 11s to fall back on. Whereas once you are pushing higher than 12s, that's when you actually get the benefit of having Resilient keys beneath you to fall back onto, right?
Yeah, you don't really get it until you finish it, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Like you'll technically get Resilient keys, obviously, if you're 3K, but like you didn't progress with Resilient keys to 3K except for your last few keys, maybe, or if you were leeching off somebody else who had them, right?
They're gonna be mad.
They're gonna be fucking mad.
Yeah.
Again.
So
I feel like what you're saying is right, but they're gonna be so mad.
Yeah, I mean, they're just bad
it's
for
one
the
of
sake
those.
of
There were a
being
lot of
mad.
people
Well, actually,
that in the comments were like, "But you get it at 3K." It's like, yeah, but you don't really, right? Like, unless the main way that you're using Resilient keys is you earn the 3K at some point early in the season, then you just farm Resilient 12s for the rest of the season, which is, I'm sure there are people that do that and they're just doing it for the gear and stuff and for the fun. And
But
that's
even
great.
then, that argument
like,
we were making didn't even involve saying that those people aren't included.
Right.
We were, that whole situation I will never understand. But it's also okay. I'm okay with thinking that just we're stupid and don't get it. By the way, that's the result.
It does strike me that the parts of Resilient keys that are super great, the fact that it takes some pressure off of you and it's you feel less stupid inviting less skilled friends or off meta specs, it seems like that would go really hard at the +7 level and the plus.
Yeah, I just don't understand why it exists at high keys that it doesn't before.
One reason I can see Blizzard not doing this is because you're just going to see a whole lot less keys below 10 if that was the case. Because, I mean, it's already happening. I don't know if you guys have seen, but apparently over the last week, the keys that were completed.
Say hello to the new Topo Chico Hard Max with more margarita flavor and 8% ABV.
70% of the keys completed were above 10, which is just insane. It just means that, like, nobody's actually doing low keys anymore. You know how there's always that whole theory that, like, majority of players are doing low keys?
Do you have anything to compare to like a previous season? Because I'm thinking about it right now. Like, why would anyone be doing keys this late into the season and hasn't quit already? And it's like to farm gear for their vault. I don't know why there'd be people pushing below 10 now, right? Because like you would just
there's just like a lot less people doing 10s, and I mean that's gonna be even more true if they were to add Resilient. I mean, like, there's no reason for you to ever go back down if you already completed like an 8.
But they responded to this though. They said we like Resilient's chilling.
Yeah, and I think one thing that a theory that I proposed is like, if Resilience is good, why don't we just make all keys resilient? But one thing you would lose with that they pointed out that I do agree with is it is a big checkpoint that feels good to get to. Like earning Resilient 14s, 15s, 16s. That's if you look at like stream titles even in the WoW category, it's like, oh my god, I just got Resilient 18s or pushing for Resilient 15s, right? Like that has added a huge amount of meaningful milestones to M+ pushing. So I think that part's good. I just do kind of think that they would go crazy for the lower key level audience.
Yeah. Also, sorry, I didn't mean.
No, I didn't have any more to say. I just said.
Okay, yeah. Thank God.
Yeah.
But just to like clear up our like take on it, I think we are pro-resilient. I think the people that were mad at us thought we were like anti-resilient. I think we are pro-resilient, and really our main drawback was like people might be selling them.
Right. But like it's a small issue.
It's a small issue. Yeah, we don't think the whole thing should be changed for that. And if that has to happen for the overall benefit of Resilient to exist, that can happen. That could be the case forever, and it would be a slight downside, but still overall positive. So we are pro. We're on your side, basically. We all want the same thing.
If you hear us talking about a negative of a system, it doesn't mean that we think the entire system is negative.
It sounds like we've been kidnapped and we're currently being held hostage. By the way. All good.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we said this last week.
I've learned from the comments as well that we are the politicians of WoW, and also what we say is dangerous because Ian will do whatever we say.
Yeah, that was a fucking good.
Oh,
yeah.
dude, that one comment was like, "You guys are not allowed to have your opinions. This is not about your opinions.
Yeah.
You guys are WoW politicians."
It's not about what you guys are saying right now that I'm mad at. I'm mad that you're rubbing shoulders with Ian and what you might say or something like that. It's like, so you're just mad. So you just don't like us. So why are you listening to this? Wouldn't that drive you insane?
I just got to tell you, if you are ever commenting on a YouTube video because you're worried that somebody's opinion is bad, you are amplifying it. Like putting a comment on a YouTube video is the single worst thing you could ever do for making somebody's voice less heard.
Dude, they're gonna be mad again. 3 straight fucking weeks.
Dude, we made it. We made it so deep in the podcast this time that they might have tuned out by now. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, we were just engagement baiting, honestly.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, well, Dranos has to go soon. I'm just trying to see if there's any other absolute banger questions here. I don't think so. It's like there's a couple very interesting like raid assignment stuff that has like a cool answer, but like I don't know. That's kind of like side stuff. The dungeon. Oh, what about did they have anything interesting with like the dungeon difficulty?
Yeah, they talked about the whole dungeons getting disarmed in Season 2 and how people are having a lot more fun. So how do they plan on continuing with that approach? Which, I mean, it is actually a really important question because of the whole add-on removal situation, right? Like, if they're removing Omni City, are we going to make dungeons easier? Are we going to have mobs that won't spam cast as much? Because that is definitely a concern when we're bringing back dungeons like Halls of Atonement and Gambit, which are banger dungeons, by the way, but
yeah,
they could just dragonflightify them and make them completely terrible to play.
Yeah, I something tells me that that's not like I'm glad that they could you the one thing I saw they announced Halls of Atonement, and I was like, dude, could you imagine if they brought back Halls of Atonement with Season 1 design philosophy and what they would have done to that dungeon had they brought it back then? Like Halls of Atonement,
it would have been awful.
We don't want you to do any big pulls ever. Like whatever that looks like version of that dungeon, it would have been so bad.
One thing that I do wish they would change is True Sight. Also, the meld potion. That's I've completely forgot about that.
Oh, we need to talk about the meld potion.
Yeah.
Oh my, that's a big fucking change.
Well, it's a big change. So I think it's good. Like, obviously, it's not the best solution to that. Like, I think a lot of people are like, we'd like to play whatever race we want, and our racials don't matter. Like, I'm in that camp for sure. But they're not going to do that, right? So, like, what they're doing is, hey, if you can't be a night elf, here's an option. Obviously, if you're a night elf, you can have this potion and shadow meld, so you could potentially shadow meld multiple casts or stuff like that. But it's still helping bridge the gap between not being a night elf and being one. High-end players will probably still be night elf in case you can use it a second time. It's still just the best thing. My solution is make shadow meld just not work in dungeons, just like you do in raid. Like imagine in raid if you just are a raid designer and you're just sweating going into every raid fight, like, oh man, I hope they don't make one of my abilities completely not work because I'm shadow melding it. Yeah, that would be insane. So like, why does dungeons have to deal with that? Just make it not happen. But like, I think what I came to the conclusion of is they can't do that because they can't make it different in a normal and a mythic plus. The reaction between shadow meld and what's happening to you has to be the same. And I think the LARPing night elf in a normal dungeon at the beginning of the season wants to be able to shadow meld to not die as an important part of, like, you have shadow meld, you should be able to use it at the normal level, right? And it would be impossible for them in mythic plus to make shadow meld not work and then in normal make it work. Because otherwise, wouldn't you just remove Shadow Meld working rather than have this potion solution.
So
Yeah.
I'm on both camps personally. Like I think it's really cool to have these like techie kind of potions. I mean, as long as I don't get disqualified for using them in
Yeah, I was
MDI,
about
but
to say, of course you are.
Yeah, you like it
Yeah,
now,
but I
but
mean-
next expansion when you try and
Yeah.
use this thing, tell me how you're feeling.
Yeah, I'm fucked. Yeah, I mean, I really like this type of stuff, right? Like, M Plus is all about tech. It's all about just like coming up with cool strategies, and this amplifies that feeling. But I also wish they would just allow players to just, I don't know, just like pick whatever racials we want or some shit. Whatever it is, because like I don't want to be a stinking dwarf too half the time, but I'm just forced to be a dwarf, and I know people get mad about that, but like, it is what it is, right? And
Never.
they don't need to, like, I get that like it's been in the game forever, and it's one of those like, oh, like it's a core part of WoW fantasy RPG, yada yada yada. But Blizzard has made changes that haven't made any sense in the past, like cross faction, right? Like cross faction was a massive barrier for them to break down, and they went on and just broke factions
And the game is a lot
just
better for
allowed.
doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's like some of these ideas are just way too antiquated, and they should just
Ooh, good
do
use of
something about it.
antiquated. Let's go. Dude,
You like that?
I ripped an antiquated in one of our, it was like a farm raid or progression raid, and I never heard the fucking end of that, by the way. I was like the oldest person that's ever existed for saying that word.
Ironic.
I mean, ironic.
Well, that's what the word means. So it's because
Are you doing a bit?
no, it's like antiquated. It means old, right?
Yeah, but how does
And
that
then
mean
you are
ironic?
old for using a vocab word also. So it's like, but it's ironic that the word
Oh,
you're
I
getting
see.
means old.
He's
right?
saying that
Yeah,
you're dated.
like basically, Shaq and Fired Up had never heard that word before, and it started becoming part of their vocabulary all the time, purely just to make fun of me for saying it in the first place.
That is crazy because I assume there are about 4 million words they've never heard before, and they picked that one.
Yeah, also penultimate is one I ripped one
Oh.
time, and they absolutely love that one.
That's a good word.
That's a normal word. It's
That
the
is-
best way to
It sounds
describe
cool as
the
fuck.
second to last boss.
Yeah.
All right, fuck yeah.
All right. Yep,
Body
that's,
blow up.
that's it. Patios.
Remove racials. I'm not racist.
Yeah, they're never gonna do it, man. It's the same reason they brought back like buffs. Like, why did Druid get like Mark of the Wild back when they? Because, and they said in an interview, it's like, well, when people used to play Druid and they're logging back in WoW for the first time, they used to buff themselves while questing with Mark of the Wild, and we want that to happen again. Like, that is why that button exists. That's why raid buffs exist, because of that. You know, like, so the whole like, oh, I played a Shadow Meld in 2000, or I played a Night Elf in 2005. I could Shadow Meld then. Wait, I log in, I can't Shadow Meld. I have to select it from a race, like a racial selector. Oh well, this totally takes me out of it. And then they like look at their horde flag in their room, and they're like, this is not the game they played when they grew up. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the
Yeah.
fear. Yeah, that's why they'll never do it.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, last second tangent.
Nope,
Goodbye.
it's good. Adios.
All right, adios.
Okay.
Ghost of Koresh.
To give the players an upgradable artifact that had a visible...
Again, let's do class changes, then tier sets. That sound good? I mean, I've made the decision. We're doing it. All right, here we go. New talent, Unholy Momentum. Well, this is the first thing mentioned. It just says increases haste by 2%. That has to be a raid haste buff, right? I think. Is that why they're... No? That's such a bait. Why would they go into this whole, like, this clear, long thing about raid compositions? I'm, like, seeing those words. See AMZ, see Death Grip. And then why did they lead with this? It just looks like a raid buff. All right, man. Well, if they're looking at the DK raid buff, all right, let's just look at it. We've talked about this 100 times. I have directly asked them about DKs not having a suitable raid buff at least 3 times to their face in interviews. Let's see what they did. In Ghost of Koresh, we are looking at Death Knight's raid utility to help give them a better identity that isn't completely reliant on tuning to make an impact. That is true. They were completely reliant on tuning, which the reason they didn't get this earlier is because they were frequently tuned really well. Like, I know one rebuttal they had for a while was like, you're bringing a DK to every end boss. And like basically for like years of interviews, and they were right every time. But it was purely based on tuning. So they get that. Okay, one immediate change, as you may notice, is that A-Bomb limb has been removed. Okay, I heard that. I'm interested in that because Abomination's limb was obviously really good, but it also was kind of the only way that DK DPS was brought instead of DK tank. Because like DK tank has like shorter single grips and they have mass grip. But a lot of times A-Bomb limb was so good that you didn't care about the other stuff. You just needed a single A-Bomb's limb at this time in the fight to make this work. Or you needed an A-Bomb limb and an A-Bomb limb here and an A-Bomb limb there. And then mass grip didn't matter. Single grip's way less important. But A-Bomb limb is what you needed. But because of that, A-Bomb limb is so powerful that it's like, I don't know. I think this, okay, let's see. Its existence made it incredibly hard to grip no matter, it made it incredibly hard for grip to matter in any real capacity because of how potent and easily accessible it became. Do they mean the singular death grip? But Abomination limb is that. I see what they mean. So they want single grip to be the reason you're bringing a Death Knight to a raid fight. And A-Bomb limb was so good that it devalued single grip. I think you're looking at that the wrong way. When we're looking at bringing a class to a fight, you know, like a lot of people are just going to do what we do. So I'll give you our line of thinking. It's about how you get the grips you need with the least amount of DKs. And like A-Bomb's limb is always the answer to that. So like when you're looking at like needing grips for a raid fight, you're looking at bringing an A-Bomb's limb. So even if you make it, I don't know, you're still making DKs weaker compared to other classes by the removal of this as well, though. Unless you just change the way grips work fundamentally, or if you make it to where literally only single grip works on them. Which, I mean, well, okay, they can't really do that. They're just gonna remove. Okay, let's see. This led to too many raid mobs being immune to grip. Oh, okay, so they're saying like because of A-Bomb limb's existence, we had to make mobs immune to grip. Okay, I mean, I'm not going to do this right now, but it'd be very interesting to just at least go through the last, like, couple years of raid bosses and look at ads that would want to be gripped but couldn't be because of this line of thinking that I haven't really thought of before that they've been doing that, specifically because of A-Bomb's limb. Like, obviously, like, One-Arm Bandit this tier, maybe more significantly. Okay? But that A-Bomb limb wouldn't be the reason specifically you would do that. I mean, one DK DPS or tank could easily single grip them all on top of each other every set. You would just grip the left and right one to the middle. So that wouldn't make... anyways, we'll look into this a little bit later. As what should normally be one of Death Knight's most powerful tools. This change limits the number of death grips available to a raid at any moment and allows us to design more moments for death grip to be tactical and powerful when Death Knights choose to use it. This change should be immediately apparent in the new raid Mana Forge Omega. I don't know if I'm exactly following this. I'll read what they're going to do here. I see AMZ a lot here. But, okay, so they made a change recently to a class, Shamans, where they gave them a very, very good raid buff, actually. Because while, yes, you were bringing a Shaman to every raid, it was only one spec. Are they not doing the same thing with Death Knight tanks here? Maybe one of the issues with that was AMZ, like Death Knight tanks AMZ was stronger than DPSs for no reason, and maybe they're addressing that here. But isn't this, if you're making single grip more important, are they changing anything? Guys, you guys have read all the notes, I'm assuming. It's been 2 days. Are they making it to where tank DKs don't have almost double the amount of single grips as DPS DKs do? And just tell me, no, they're not changing that? Then what is this change? Like, you're just, okay, you're going to want DKs in raid comps now. Okay, cool, but it's just going to be blood. If you're going to make single grip specifically really impactful, like they said, blood DK is going to be infinitely better than DPS DK. Obviously, none of this is based on tuning. Maybe DPS DK is like the best class in the game and you bring 3 of them or something, but like that could happen to any class, right? Purely based on what you bring to a raid, a blood DK brings significantly more than DPS. In fact, the removal of Abomination Limb actually makes that worse. Like, A-Bomb Limb was the equalizer. It was the best gripping tool, which they recognized here. But because of that, it actually was the thing kind of making the single grip difference and the mass grip difference not matter, because usually the solution in our guild when you needed to grip things was, you need A-Bomb's Limb, and when do you need A-Bomb's Limb? It wasn't ever mass grip, right? So this okay, maybe they'll make it to where you want things to grip more, and maybe DK's getting raids not based on tuning. Sure, I'm just saying that the gap between why you'd want to bring a DK, it being a tank versus a DPS, in my opinion, from this has actually gotten wider, which is a problem. Anyways, okay. Secondly, plenty of time has passed since Castle Nathria, and it's given us some time to reflect on our change to capping anti-magic zone. Their change, chat, just reminding you. In Ghost of Crash, we are returning AMZ to a percentage magic damage reduction effect with no cap. No cap. Okay. Obviously, they're going to have to nerf it. Like, because the reason they... So, while I never advocated it for it to be an absorb, or how they changed it, it did need to be nerfed from what it was before. Hopefully unbiased or maybe even biased people understand that literally any class in the game that is a DPS or a tank, not a healer, basically, having a 2-minute cooldown, 20% DR is absurdly broken. It's just way stronger than every other utility in the game. Why does that exist? It has to be nerfed in some way. They didn't nerf it in the right way, but we never really came up with an example of how they could have nerfed it where it wouldn't have been worse. Like, I've always thought, like, having it be basically the same thing, but a 3-minute cooldown or a 4-minute cooldown would make sense. But I don't know. We've increased the cooldown and reduced the duration and effectiveness downward. Oh, and okay, what it was prior to Castle Nathria nerf, which should better align with our expected output for a DPS tank and damage reduction cooldown. We hope that by adding this, how much is it? 6 seconds down from, was it 8 or 10? Reducing the magic damage taken by party or raid members by 15% down from 20 in a 4-minute cooldown. Okay, steep nerf. This will still end up being... This will definitely be better in a raid environment than it was before. So this is a slight buff to AMZ, in my opinion. Even at 15%, I mean, with the damage cap, AMZs on any real mythic raid fight with the raid in them, that shit was getting eaten in 1 instant. So this is still significantly... Oh, wait. Missed something. Assimilation has been updated. The cooldown of Anti-Magic Zone is reduced by 60 seconds, and it's now an 8-second duration. So 3-minute, 15% DR. Yeah, that's online. That's multiple levels of magnitude better than it was with the absorb cap. It's certainly worse than it was in Castle Nathria, but again, Castle Nathria is... The Castle Nathria Anti-Magic Zone was maybe the single most broken piece of raid utility that anyone's ever had. So that should have been nerfed. Ever had might be a stretch, but certainly at that time in the game, and would be now at this time in the game, since most of the other stuff like Rally and Devo has been nerfed and stuff. Yeah, that's good. Maybe we'll take another look at Rally. If we're talking about raid cooldowns that have been nerfed a little too much, maybe Aura Mastery for Paladins as well. Okay, continuing on. Okay, so, I mean, again, even still, my take here is there's not a lot of classes... If you just remove tuning, there's not a lot of classes when you are deciding whether to bring them to a raid that you just definitely want one spec rather than another spec when bringing that class's buff. They removed it with Enhance. I could take some time and actually think about it now, I guess. I mean, I guess in a perfectly tuned world, you'd rather have AUG rather than Dev as a DPS evoker because... Or I guess rather than any evoker, because they just have a cheat death, and cheat death is just absurdly broken. Just removing everything else about AUG, if you're just removing numbers entirely, would you rather have a class with a cheat death or that one? Like, it's pretty obvious, right? Same thing with mages. You'd rather have your mages be fire. No question. So, but also, like, AUG is, or Evoker's weird because, like, you don't even really bring Evoker for their singular raid buff. You bring them because of all the utility each one of them individually brings, which is actually stackable past one, which is unique to them. Maybe, yeah, Evoker's a bad example. You get the point, though. Blood DKs are just way better than DPS DKs. Like, if you're just removing tuning right now, let's just say every class in the game is averagely tuned, and they do what they say here, and they make it so grips are really, really good. I can tell you, from someone whose job it is to solve that problem, the absolute first thing I would do is ask our tanks if double blood DK is viable. Instantly. Because you haven't used Mass Grip in a while, because it's just, like, super niche, and because A-Bomb's Limb is so good, but Mass Grip is going to be so much more important and so much better if they're saying that grips are going to become more important and A-Bomb's Limb is removed. So Mass Grip, worst case scenario, just gets you an extra single grip every, you know, every minute and a half or so, right? So they have more, and just they just have more single grips. So I don't know if that's their solution, but I can absolutely promise you, from a problem solver point of view, if they're saying to do this, and tuning was equal across the board, double blood DK is move number one with this. Max, what are you talking about? Mass Grip was Giga on Brood Twister. Bro, you just... Okay, name me one other boss in the last a couple years where Master... Like, you're talking Fyrakk, Brood Twister, Styx, you didn't even need a DK. What I'm saying is, like, you don't... When you need a grip on a boss, you don't normally think, like, oh, I need Mass Grip. Like, it's... Usually our DKs are like, it's not even worth talenting into it in the world first race. Like, blood DKs. Like... A-Bomb's Limb absolutely devalued Mass Grip. What are you arguing? I don't even know. Why am I responding to this? I'm just okay. Here we go. Hero talents. I'm not gonna read a bunch of these because if they're like actually turbo, oh my god, yeah. There's like fucking 15 new talents. I might want to touch on stuff here that is like significant and easy to understand, obvious stuff, which I think, because this has been a few days, one benefit of that, which is not normally the case, is you guys could probably lead me in the direction of what I should actually look at. Look at Breath of Sindragosa change. Oh, fucking lock in. Lock in. That is one of my favorite buttons of all time. Breath of Sindragosa has been... Did they make this a fucking empower ability? Oh, that sounds... Why do I have, like, an innate, like, Dobby feeling about something being an Empower cooldown? Is this the first time they've added an Empower thing to any class in the game besides Evoker? I think so, right? Because, oh, Slicing Winds. Yeah, the Plunderstorm thing. You're right. Okay, let's look at it. I don't even know why I said that. Like, I think Empower works. Like, there was a lot of dooming. Like, when Empower first came out, people were like, they're going to make everyone's class Empower now. Like, aim shot's going to be Empower every time. And I think there's definitely cool ways to do Empower. Like, Evoker has proved that. There's multiple Empowers on Evoker that are really cool, and the decision-making process is really nice. And then some of them where it's like, I'm holding a button for a long time for no reason, and there's no decision-making. It's just always best to go to 3, right? So, like, or 1. Those are an example where it's bad. So they've done both. Okay, Breath of Sindragosa has been redesigned. Call upon Sindragosa's aid in battle, consuming 16 runic power to deal frost damage every second to enemies in a cone in front of you. Okay, so that part of it has not been redesigned. It seems like it is exactly the same as Breath. It's just the Empower section that's new. It's a 1.2 second Empower. It's a 2-minute cooldown, so same, and has 3 stages. All right. Stage 1. So if you let that shit go off right away, deals frost damage instantly. Okay, so, this is actually important. So, usually Breath of Sindragosa just starts, like, it's not actually a channel, but it, like, starts the channeling of breath instantly, and there's no active. So, one important thing they're doing here for Empowers, which sounds good in theory, is they're making you holding the Empower, they're adding a second element to Breath of Sindragosa, and they're giving it an initial hit. And that's super important. It's actually exactly what they were trying to do. Do you guys remember a few years ago when they added a global cooldown to everyone's offensive button, and everyone hated it, and they ended up reverting almost all of them? What they were trying to do was they wanted to do that, yes, but they didn't do it with the intention of slowing you down. They wanted to give that GCD a ton of upfront power, and they did it with a few buttons in the game correctly that went on GCD then and have stayed that way because it actually felt good for it to be pressed on the GCD if it meant that the reward was you lose a global, but that global fucking owns, you know, like it just does insane damn. A couple examples of that were like, I think like the arcane power change is basically that. There was a rogue button too that worked the exact same way, right? Vendetta getting changed to Deathmark. So I think they're kind of cooking with that part. I like that part. It's gonna make that feel a lot better. Oh, it only lasts for 8. Whoa. Okay, so if you insta-charge breath... Okay, let's look at 3. So if you just charge breath fully, it's going to last for 30 seconds, which is kind of the intention of how long it really should last now. So they're basically saying, hey, you fully empower this shit, we're giving you what breath feels like in the current patch, right? And what a lot of people have hoped for, which is... And it's easier to tune this way, too, is actually capping breath's duration. I personally am someone who has really enjoyed infinite breath times, but I think it's way easier to balance and to create a better playstyle to have it be a really high intensity short duration, in my opinion. Short meaning not infinite, right? So I fuck with this in theory, right? Who knows how this is gonna play out until we can actually play with it, but okay. So you get Reggie breath if you fully empower, but if you choose to do it early, do they give you an interesting decision? You get a shorter breath, makes sense, has to be the case. But what do you get for the shorter breath? 75 seconds of its cooldown. So what, this becomes a 45-second cooldown and lines up with Pillar? Or you can reduce it by 45 seconds and it's a minute and 15, which lines up with Pillar in that other talent build, or at least what used to be that other talent build. They made a bunch of changes here, so maybe they changed that. But I know Frosty K's recently were a minute and 15-second rotating class. Are they kind of cooking with this? I mean, isn't this exactly what you want to have an Empower, right? So if you as opposed to before, they set actual parameters for it. If you're doing a mythic race to world first, but you get the most bang for your buck. If you use a 2-minute cooldown, you're getting the best value by breath timing by having it up for 30 seconds. But, right, not everything's 2 minutes. Maybe your Pillar or Empower Rune Weapon or something is just rotating at a different time. Or you're doing a fight where, yeah, I need to do damage with this 2-minute, but the Lust is actually a minute and a half from now, and otherwise I would actually have to wait to use this breath so it's up when Lust is up. That happens all the fucking time in progression, by the way, right? And then you just know on that one, you set a little note to yourself to only empower to 2 on that. And yeah, you're not going to have as strong of cooldowns, but you're going to have your breath come up during Lust and you're going to pop the fuck off. Bro, this is... You never know how things are going to play out. There's actually been so many things in the last 2 years where Blizzard has announced an idea for something, and I read the idea and I read the theory behind it, and I'm like, that totally owns, and then it completely sucks. You know? That's happened. So I don't know if this is going to completely suck or not, but this seems really, really good. There's a scenario where I could see this not being great. If you end up playing Breath and it's actually correct to make it a 45-second cooldown to line up with something every single time for 8 seconds, which seems unlikely because you're getting such bad value on the amount of Breath uptime. Someone in chat mentioned rank 3 has 25% uptime and rank 1 has 15% uptime, though. That is a big difference, but the 15% uptime could potentially always be in CDs where the other one maybe isn't. Here's my if you're always hitting a 1, I think that's bad. If you're always hitting a 2, I think that's bad. I think the best version of this gameplay-wise is you're hitting a 3 on pull and Lust. You're hitting a 3 most of the time, unless you're using a 1 or a 2 to fit into a specific fight situation or Mythic Plus situation. If you're in a lower key and the pack isn't going to live as long, you're absolutely hitting a 2, right? No question. A key... Dude, if you guys have ever played Breath of Syndragosa in a key 2 low situation, this is the best change of all time. It's fucking so good. But yeah, but if you always are hitting a 1 and that's the best thing to do for damage, that just means the tuning on this is wrong. That's pretty easy to change with just how long a 3 lasts, I think. I I love this. Anyways, grants a charge of Empower Rune Weapon at the start and 2 runes at the end. Grants a charge of Empower Rune Weapon at the start? Okay, they changed that button, I think. Castable while moving with 30% reduced movement speed. Oh, so like while you're empowering, you're not... Oh yeah, I mean, if you had to stand still and empower this, that would be horrible. Why do you even have a reduced movement speed penalty, is my question. I guess because if you can never add it once you've had it be there. Flavor, friction, function. I mean, you can Death's Advance it anyway, right? Fuck it. Cool. Dev note, we are exploring a new design space with this iteration of Resident Evil, so we want this update to give you more control over how you use the ability. Yeah, I totally fuck with this. W by me. Someone said to read above about Empower Rune Weapon. Empower Rune Weapon has been designed. Drain your will of your enemy to empower your rune weapon, dealing Shadow Frost damage and reduce damage to nearby enemies, granting 40 runic power and granting you Killing Machine. Wait. Has 2 charges with a 30-second recharge. Oh, so that's like all the time. You're gonna okay. So just a little runic power gain and a Killing Machine proc. Interesting. So it does damage now? Must be, yeah. It says drains the will of your enemy. That's definitely going to do damage. We found that there were too many passive effects that granted rune or runic power and Frost DK's resource economy. While moving away from some of these passive effects, we want to give you the tools and resources more methodically. Okay. I mean, obviously, hopefully this is off the GCD. Let's just go ahead. This has to be off the GCD. Like, no question. But it's going to be really hard for me to give a take on this because I haven't played new Frost DK since all these changes, and even if I spent my time reading all this shit, which I won't, it would be so hard to understand what the gameplay is going to actually feel like, and especially when they're messing around with how your runic power is going to feel, there's just no way to know how this new Empower Rune Weapon could feel fucking amazing. Like, every time you press this, you need that 40 runic power so bad, and if that's the case, this is going to feel great. But also, if you're like, runic power, if you have too much... I mean, you guys know how it is, right? Anytime you are starved and or cannot stop from capping from, so the 2 extremes of runic power, runes, or any other resource your class has, right? That sucks. So hopefully they get that right. It's a 0.75 GCD. I haven't even played with that, and it is possible I'm out here hating on something I haven't even tried and it's actually fine. But I would say very strongly right now that this being on the GCD at all is terrible. Any kind of GCD, bad. Bad, stinky, bad. It needs to be off the GCD. That would be my feedback. Especially, like, dude, just imagine the feeling right now. Like, you're not going to miss a global because you don't have enough runic power to Frost Strike, and it's the only thing you could possibly do, or you need a Killing Machine proc at the end of your cooldowns, and you press this, but then you miss your cooldown window because you got that necessary Killing Machine or runic power to press your global on time, but you couldn't because it was a global. This is horrible. Like, I don't know, man. It's a damage button. I don't care. It's a damage button, but unless it's going to absolutely fucking own, it has to... It needs that, like... it's hard to describe. I was gonna say it needs to have that snap feeling. I don't even know... That's a terrible way to describe what I'm trying to say. But if it does ass damage, it needs to own or it needs to be off the GCD. Basically. The GCD has to basically be made up for by how much damage it does, or it needs to be off the GCD. Or just remove... Yeah, just remove the damage. Because the reality is you're pressing this because you want the effect, you know? Okay. Anything else here to read from DKs that isn't like... Like, basically, I want to avoid everything here that isn't just, like, part of an overall bigger package of changes. And basically, you're going to play it for the first time and you're going to realize how all of them work together and you're going to feel how the gameplay flows. But, like, reading them all individually when there's, like... I mean, how many new talents is there? Like, 20? Like, it's just nonsense. You're reading words. So just give me like a small baseline. Anything left for Frost? You retain D&D for a few seconds when outside of it. Okay, cool. Read Killing Streak. Obliterate and Frost Scythe consume all killing machines to deal 25% increased critical strike damage and grants 1.5% haste for 6 seconds for each stack consumed. Multiple applications may overlap. I'm assuming Iron First Style. New third gate talent before obliteration. Interesting. So you are... I mean, your cooldown window is going to feel a ton better. I feel like this is one of those things that you're going to need to see how the rest of this plays out. Because, like, obviously they could be increasing the amount of killing machines you get by a lot to make this a lot better. You know, I just don't know. No more D&D Oblit Cleave for Frost. Oh, interesting. That was a huge part of why you would actually bring them to raids. Replaced by extra Frost Scythe damage with Remorseless Winter Up. Oh, so like they didn't like the fact that you didn't take things like Frost Scythe and you relied more on just like your big single target cleaving a few other things, and they actually want to like emphasize that. They want you to more intentionally AoE on Frost is what they want. I can kind of see that. I mean, that could be fine. For whatever reason, I've always hated binding Frost Scythe. It's always just anytime that button's been meta, I was not happy. But I'm sure they made that not the case here. Okay. I think I'm gonna skip all the rest of the Frost stuff. Wait, did they get rid of Chill Streak entirely? You know what? I think that might be okay. I really loved it when it was like the PvP artifact or Azerite thing. And there's been a few bosses where it really shined, but it is kind of like just like a thing in your rotation that, I don't know. And it's just been really bad for a while. Oh, they got rid of Cold Heart. Okay, no more. How did I feel about Cold Heart? I think Cold Heart's kind of whatever. I think it ran its course. Removed Horn of Winter. I'm a fan of that. Removed a few of these things. Okay. Unholy. With Ghost of Koresh, we're looking to reduce the number of cooldowns Unholy Death Knight has and provide some new tools to both apply and remove festering wounds and AoE more efficiently. Okay, this is like their third attempt at getting that right. Specifically the last sentence. It's all one sentence, the last part of that sentence. Some talents have changed positions. I don't care about that. I'm going to ignore all of the new talent stuff. Not familiar with their tree layout at the moment. Abomination Limb has been renamed to Legion of Souls and redesigned. Okay. So Unholy specifically is keeping some version of A-Bomb's Limb. Summon a Legion of Clawing Souls to assist you, dealing shadow damage and applying up to 6 festering wounds over 12 seconds to all nearby enemies. Deals reduced damage beyond 5 targets. Alright, stop right here. Next on the long list of things they need to address is why they randomly decide to cap some things at 5 and some things at 8 or 20, you know? I think that's the next thing that needs to be addressed. Like, target caps need to be... Like, the goal with target caps made sense. The theory was good. It didn't work. It's still not working. And with you basically designing new abilities with a 5 target cap, are you saying to yourself as a Blizzard developer, alright, but specifically... Legion of Souls on 5 targets is going to beat uncapped classes. Because if that's not true, which we've proven before doesn't really work in this game consistently, what are we doing here? Why is this number not 8? Right? Or why are the ones that are 8 not 5? One of the two. Why are they... I just don't get it. All good, though. Grants you the benefits of Standing in Death and Decay. Choice note against Raise A-Bomb. Okay, so like AoE... Like an AoE cooldown... Oh, it's a choice note against Raise A-Bomb. Does Raise A-Bomb still take the place of Army? So this would be like AoE Army of the Dead, basically. That's kind of sick. Looks like it's going to look really cool, too. Or sounds like it's going to look really cool. All will serve as been redesigned. Raise Dead summons an additional skeletal archer at your command that shoots blighted arrows. Okay, when you have a guy out, your sudden Doom Death Coil makes him shoot more, and Epidemic will cause it to ricochet to 2 additional targets. That's kind of cool. Just making that talent a lot better. Reaping has an additional effect. Soul Reaper's execute effect increases the damage of your minions by 10% for 8 seconds. Depends on how much damage is coming from minions, but making Unholy DK's